Well, hello. Let me turn this down. Music. Come on, music. There we go. Just okay. Just a little bit. It was just a little bit. Okay. Hello. 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 It's me again. I guess. We out here. I don't want to take up too much time with the intro. I may end up changing this. May end up slotting in something, editing something out, putting something else in, but there's some topics that I really want to get into. Some fun topics, some not so fun topics. New diet just dropped. I think that's kind of hilarious. It just dropped. I think the video is like 2 something years old, but it's the first time I've ever heard of it, of this diet. And we're going to look into that. We're going to continue looking at the meat versus plant-based arguments. We'll even look at two different types of debates and two different types of conversations. Because again, I don't feel like debate lording or debate broing, which is the idea that you're just kind of trying to have a battle of wits and trying to catch the other person in like this kind of situation where they don't have readily available information, and so you think that you got over them and you've won the argument, but you didn't really sway anyone's opinion. You kind of only just kind of tried to flex your muscles as being a good person that can argue, but you didn't exactly persuade anyone. So we're going to take a look at that, see if there's arguments that are being made that will actually be beneficial to most individuals, or if they're just going to be the types of arguments that, you know, or you just kind of throw something out there hoping that they don't have the background information. Even if they do, you really don't listen to anything. You just stonewall the entire time. Let's look at if they're straw manning or anything like that. Looking at the rhetorical devices as well. We're going to be really kind of deep diving and looking into that. So let's go ahead and get started in it, because I think it's going to be a great time. I think it's going to be kind of fun. But we are going to first look at the health risks versus the benefits of meat consumption. So I want to start by setting a foundation of information before we start getting into more videos after this, looking at specifically the diet. So we want to look at the health risk and benefits, because again, you know, there's a cost benefit analysis when it comes to just about anything that we're going to consume. So we want to look at it in its totality, understand why this is quote unquote better. Are we saying it's better just because it's what we prefer? Or are we saying it's better because it's what the science is saying? So we'll take a look at this video, the health risks versus benefits of meat consumption, brought to you by nutritionfacts.org. So we're going to take a look at their video and see what they have to say about the health benefits.
A series of papers published in the Annals of Internal Medicine that largely discounted all but the highest quality randomized studies reached a conclusion directly contrary to the public health advice we've heard for years. They suggested that we should continue our current consumption of both red and processed meat. The authors based their exclusion of evidence on the so-called GRADE criteria, which were mainly developed for evaluating evidence from drug trials. We need randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials for drugs, but strictness of these criteria would probably cause evidence for just about every dietary, lifestyle, and environmental factor related to chronic disease to be graded as low or very low evidence. If the GRADE criteria were used to evaluate the evidence for other factors related to diet, such as inadequate fruits and vegetables, or too much soda or alcohol, or whether or not exercise is good, or safe sex, or sleep, smoking, air pollution, none of the current recommendations on these issues would be supported by high or even moderate quality evidence using the drug trial criteria. But even after ignoring major parts of the available evidence, they still found an association between meat intake and an increased risk of cancer. And not just cancer, they found that adherence to dietary patterns lower in red or processed meat intake may result in a decreased risk for premature death, cardiometabolic disease, and mortality, meaning the risk of getting and dying of diseases like heart disease and type 2 diabetes, as well as the risk of getting cancer and dying from cancer. Yet they still concluded in their dietary guideline recommendations, continue your current red meat consumption, continue your processed meat consumption. Forget the whole premature death thing, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, just keep eating your burgers and bacon.
Like that's wild. Like that is that's wild. You see an outcome, but you're like, nah. Just keep keep the consumption up. Keep whatever you're doing. There's no issue. Even when you turn a blind eye to certain things, you're still going to find things that are going to be bad because it's going to be hard to isolate just all the goodness you can get from meat. But let's see. Maybe they found something that's good.
So you have these dietary guidelines developed by some self-appointed panel that are tantamount to promoting meat consumption despite their own findings that high consumption is harmful to health. How do they square that, contradicting the evidence generated from their own meta-analyses?
Crazy.
There's only one body of evidence. They found the same risk that all the other reviews found. So they're not saying meat is less risky, they're just saying the risk is acceptable. Well, you do have to consider the risks and benefits. Well, we've covered the harms. Their own data show that a moderate reduction in red and processed meat consumption can reduce total mortality by 13%, heart disease mortality by 14%, cancer mortality by 11%, and type 2 diabetes risk by 24%. What are the benefits? In short, omnivores enjoy eating meat.
In short, omnivores enjoy eating meat.
Okay. Given people's attachment to their meat-based diet, the associated risk reduction in our leading killers like cancer, heart disease, diabetes is not likely to provide sufficient motivation to reduce consumption of red meat or processed meat, so therefore, eat up. In fact, they even say straight out that unlike the other dietary guidelines suggesting we limit consumption of stuff because of like the cancer thing, these other guidelines have paid little or no attention to the reasons people eat meat.
Like that's so frustrating because I feel like if a lot of more individuals knew that it didn't have to be that you just had to completely cut it out in its totality in order for certain diseases not to happen, a lot of individuals would at the very least decrease their consumption. But not only are you showing that these things are issues and then saying that, okay, you're just going to continue because you're just not going to, you're not going to want to give it up. So why try pushing the message that you probably should try your best to give it up, and then also have an industry that partakes in that as well, supplying less red meat into the market that people can consume. It has to be a community effort. Like, of course, the individual is going to have a decision to make. But if you get to a certain point in a certain health outcome, it's because you made that certain decision over and over and over again. Or that decision, unfortunately, has been made for you over and over and over again. And now you're dealing with the outcome of the situation that you were in, having to eat whatever was available and provided to you depending on your individual situation. But to have an entire study set up to particularly look at the consumption of, dare I say, meat. Like, all you wanted to do was look at that. And so, if you can't look at that and have an honest assessment of, okay, this is what the science is saying, and then pair that with, obviously, the social norms and conditioning as well, like, that becomes its own individual study in and of itself. Now, I know, again, like, the scientists may be looking at it from a just like, hey, we're just trying to track this. Whatever they decide to do after this is what they decide to do. That's all cool, fine, and dandy. But to publish information and then to not inform or to not press as hard to inform individuals that there is a major issue here, it's hard to not continue to see or start to see some potential conflicts of interest when it comes to who is funding these endeavors and these research papers. Because again, it comes down to, for every one research paper that you can find of one kind, you could probably find another backed by a company that wants to find a particular outcome, which is just ridiculous. But, you know, that's the world of information that we live in. And that's what makes it difficult to parse through all this information, because you don't know what is true and you may see something that suggests one thing that completely just throws out and bastardizes the entire reason that a study is being conducted, or just tries to summarize it down to just two nice and neat, nicely packaged sentences. And it's like you can't do that. Or to just do like some news outlets and some individuals may do, which is just completely leave out the fact that the study was not even done on humans, and just say that this is the outcome, and have individuals just assuming that this is being done on humans or this has been tested on humans, and you come to find out this is an animal study, most likely a rat and or mouse study. It's just ridiculous.
Whereas they did a systematic review of preferences regarding meat consumption, and people who eat meat enjoy eating meat. Maybe that's even why they do it.
Yeah, like I don't. It's like I get it, and like no matter how pedantic it may be, like there's a reason for it, and like they're taking these surveys or what have you. But it's like, well, yeah, that's why they're. Yeah, that's kind of like the whole thing. The whole reason why we're starting to study why meat consumption is bad, or started to, was because that was at the rise of consumption of meat, kind of like those two ideas coexisting together. One trying to find out and inform the other on, okay, should we eat this? Should we be eating as much as this? What is scientific consensus? Oh, we don't have one. Let's start looking at it. And you have so many different options. Like I feel like I've talked about this before. You have a lot more options of finding individuals that are omnivores that eat meat than not. So your pool of potential subjects, if you will, is a bigger pool than the opposite, where you're looking at a plant-based diet. Because again, finding an individual willing to want to go through the study that is eligible for inclusion and not exclusion in your study for whatever reason. And there's so many other things that you have to fall into certain categories, and it dwindles the pool so fast that there's a reason why there's not so many studies done on vegan and veganism over the long term, because that's just harder to find and parse through in the population. But also, if you look at the population and you look at the eating habits, you'll start to see that there are also other studies that have started being produced talking now about obesity a lot more, diabetes a lot more, type 2 diabetes, talking about how it's renamed from adult onset diabetes because children are now experiencing that same metabolic state as well. So it's like these things, when you're reading and navigating through studies or food or looking at a population or looking at public health, and you start seeing that it's not necessarily cause and effect in all circumstances, but a lot of things stop being coincidences, and everything starts to kind of shift and sway in a certain direction. And when you look at it, you can either choose to, be honest and look at where it is that we've gotten and why we've gotten there, or continue to just, lie and say, well, no one wants to change anyway, so why would we even tell them the harms of this? Because there's no convincing them either way. And it's like, no, provide the information and let individuals make honest decisions for themselves, and also arm them with the information on, if they don't decide to make a certain decision, that these other outcomes could potentially rear their ugly heads as well.
They're generally unwilling to change their meat consumption, even in response to health concerns. So the panel, you'll remember, with generous support of a group getting millions every year from the meat industry,
crazy.
The panel believed that for the majority of individuals, the desirable effects like lowering your risk of family-devastating cancer and heart attacks associated with reducing meat consumption probably do not outweigh the undesirable effects like having to give up all that yummy meat. This is what led them to make their recommendation to continue current consumption. That sounds like something straight out of the journal Meat Science.
The journal Meat Science. Love it.
Why should we keep eating red meat? Because of the enjoyment. People also like to smoke, they like to drink soda, they like to have unsafe sex. I mean, it's kind of like saying, we know motorcycle helmets can save lives, but some people still prefer the feeling of the wind in their hair, so let's just tell people to not wear helmets?
Yeah, again, amazing argument. The counter argument of, just because there'll be a few that just decide to not take the recommendation doesn't mean that you shouldn't inform everyone of a potential other choice that you could potentially make. It's just silly.
But you'll actually see this argument. Complying with dietary recommendations imposes a taste cost on consumers, so how about socially desirable dietary recommendations that are most compatible with consumer preferences? That best balance health benefits against taste cost.
Taste costs. Like that, and I haven't said quotations because it's like you definitely had to have made that up. Taste costs. Balancing health benefits against taste costs.
So, hey, even if science told us that eating butter is unhealthy, its taste justifies the continuation of using it. What do you expect from Nutrirex, the meat industry partnered panel that also published a paper criticizing the sugar guidelines funded by the soda and candy industries? They aim to produce nutritional guideline recommendations based on the preferences of patients. So, what's next? Just telling people to eat donuts and ice cream all day?
Some people may be wondering what his next target will be, Dr. Hughes said, but I'm concerned about the damage that has already been done to public health recommendations. Scientists who discredited meat guidelines didn't report past food industry ties. Shocker.
Yet the annals published the meat papers with a press release saying no need to reduce red or processed meat consumption for good health. Using the same methodology and rationale, they might as well have said no need to quit smoking for good health, or no need to exercise for good health. As Dr. Katz, director of Yale's Prevention Research Center, put it, guidelines opposing the very data on which they purport to be based are not science, they are anti-science.
True. That's still so crazy to me that you can just get away with that. From a public health standpoint, it amazes me sometimes the lack of regulating the ability for, again, even research to be manipulated and skewed to a certain preferred conclusion. And again, once you start not trusting in the institutions themselves, everything falls apart from there. Where you're trying to get the most informed answer to a question, or informed as far as close to a potential answer as possible. And then you have, just a lot of mucking of the information because there's a other ulterior motive in play. It's just it's ridiculous. But we're gonna go ahead and move on with looking at the, again, science behind meat, particularly with how big meat manipulated the science. So another nutrition facts video talking about meat consumption. We're going to back that right up against the health risk versus benefits. And we already saw studies that were created in order to paint a particular narrative. So let's just see if there's more. I have a feeling that there's definitely a lot more.
Across the board, a series of studies published in the Annals of Internal Medicine found a statistically significant association between lower consumption of red and processed meats and lower total mortality, meaning living a longer life, lower cardiovascular disease mortality, as well as lower risk of dying from cancer. Yet, remarkably, The authors of these studies concluded that people should ignore all the other dietary guidelines and keep eating meat to their heart's content, or rather discontent. They offered 3 reasons why their panel reached a conclusion at odds with other contemporary dietary guidelines that advise people to cut down on meat. One reason is taste. In short, people who enjoy eating meat enjoy eating meat. I did a whole video on this. But in short, taste preference probably shouldn't be a major factor in developing dietary guidelines. Many people don't want to quit smoking, stop drinking, or exercise more, but that doesn't change the science. It shouldn't change the public health recommendations. A second reason they explain why their recommendations differ from everyone else's is that other guidelines didn't use the so-called grade approach. And no wonder, since grade was mainly developed for evaluating evidence from drug trials. There are grading systems for diet and lifestyle approaches, but the meat panel chose to inappropriately apply grade, which could similarly be misused to undermine recommendations about tobacco, air pollution, trans fats, you name it. And I've got 3 videos delving deep into all that. But this video is about the third reason they give for ignoring meat reduction advice. Other guidelines didn't highlight the very small magnitude of the meat effects. In other words, even if meat does cause heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and death, it doesn't cause that many heart attacks, doesn't kill that many people, cause that much cancer, to offset all the juicy taste benefits. Of course, it matters what people replace the meat with. Replacing even 3% of calories from animal protein with plant protein is linked to living longer. But eggs were the worst. Yes, replacing red meat protein with plant protein sources may lower overall mortality more than 10%, but getting rid of egg protein, and we're talking more than 20% lower risk of premature death. So if someone reduces meat consumption by swapping a burger for an egg salad sandwich, that particular reduction in meat could mean more mortality. But maybe they concluded there was such a small effect only because major bodies of evidence were omitted and relevant studies excluded because the authors didn't like the results. It's not that there aren't tons of randomized controlled trials about meat, it's just that they appeared to cherry-pick a few to fit their agenda, discarded studies that even met their own criteria, and wrongly rejected randomized controlled trials clearly showing that meat increased risk factors like cholesterol or blood pressure.
Of course, of course, of course, of course, of course, of course, of course. Because why not? There's no punishment for it. There's not going to be a punishment for it. The same individuals that make these studies are probably, well, I can't even say probably not the same ones that will continue to eat meat, because they probably are the ones that will continue to eat meat, unironically. But it's like the amount of blatant dishonesty and again, it comes down to, like, because in certain situations, you can have situations where there is a pressure to submit a journal or a research paper, so to speak. There is. It's true. Like, that's a thing, especially if you're hired by, again, a company, or whether it be a company that sells meat products themselves, or it's a company that does research. You can be forced into cutting lots of corners in order to try to produce something, or again to try to produce a certain outcome, because you know that if you don't produce this outcome, the source of money to continue on your study is probably going to be taken away from you. So there's a lot that can go wrong during the process of making a study. And also, just because a study is published doesn't mean that that study has a lot of accuracy. There's still a whole lot of work that has to be done after the fact, and how many times that study has been peer-reviewed. Has that study also been replicated before? Like, so there's so many other things that you can do to also look kind of deeper into certain studies to say, hey, this study found something that all these other studies didn't find, or this study has been replicated over and over and over and over and over again, that, hey, we've gotten so good at replicating this study that it's safe to extrapolate information from that meta-analysis at a certain point, which is why they had to go as far as to cherry pick and even leave out ones that would obviously fit their inclusion criteria because they didn't want that outcome. They didn't want that negative impact towards what their goal was. And that's just, again, it's just so insidious and infuriating. It should be, a crime, I feel, to disingenuously make a study, or at the very least, that study shouldn't still be available as for people to be able to point back to and say, well, this study said this, which happens now. So I wonder if this study is actually still up and published after this. And I feel like no one's probably said anything or mass reported or anything like that, so it probably is still available. But
like, why wasn't Predimed included, or the literally hundreds of randomized trials on the DASH diet? What about the Lyon Diet Heart Study, which involved randomizing individuals to a more Mediterranean diet with a significant drop in meat consumption? Compared to the control group, they experienced a 70% reduction in mortality from all causes put together. Why did they exclude that study? They excluded it because, in their words, it reported an implausibly large treatment effect. In other words, it worked too well. That's no surprise, given that this so-called Nutrirex meat panel was partnered with and had multiple people on the payroll of Texas A&M AgriLife, which receives literally millions of dollars in meat industry money every year. So you probably won't be shocked to find out they also excluded research comparing health outcomes of vegetarians to meat eaters. As they described it, they were interested in realistic decreases in meat consumption, like cutting down 3 servings a week. In fact, the study that they mostly relied on, the Women's Health Initiative, achieved only a difference of 1.4 servings of meat per week. That could be like a half an ounce difference in meat consumption per day, about a fifth of a hamburger. Participants in the Women's Health Initiative reduced meat intake only modestly, resulting in a modest reduction in mortality related to breast cancer. This finding in no way supports the notion that there's no need to reduce red or processed meat consumption for good health. Rather, it shows that modest dietary changes yield modest benefits. As an analogy, if studies showed that modest reductions in tobacco use yielded only modest health benefits, it would be inaccurate and dangerous to suggest that there's no need to reduce tobacco use for good health.
Good argument.
To say that small increases in meat consumption only cause small increases in the risk of disease doesn't mean that eating meat is good for you. That's like saying that smoking 24 cigarettes a day increases your risk of lung cancer only a little more than smoking 20 cigarettes a day. Being careful not to include any studies that compared smoking 24 to smoking none, and then erroneously concluding that smoking isn't that bad for your health. Despite all that, despite the ignoring evidence, excluding evidence, the meat panel nonetheless found entirely consistent, clinically meaningful, statistically significant adverse effects of eating more meat and processed meat on all-cause mortality, on cardiovascular disease, on cancer, and on diabetes. That they did so despite all the obstacles they put on the path to this finding is nearly incredible and directly bespeaks the magnitude of adverse effects of meat and processed meat intake on health. Based on their meta-analyses of large cohorts, dietary patterns with, again, just a moderate reduction in red and processed meat consumption were associated with lower total mortality by 13%, lower cardiovascular disease mortality by 14%.
And now, again, like this entire time, and I want to stress this a lot more than Dr. Greger is, but this is looking at it with just a moderate reduction. So this isn't even an entire exclusion of meat in this situation. It is a situation where all you're doing is slightly decreasing and a moderate reduction. So even when looking at it and all of those other arguments of, well, are you really parsing hairs and splitting hairs by saying, well, there's decimal points between if I if I crunch the numbers and I'm able to eat this amount of this, I can still eat this amount and still stay within this range of mortality. And it's like, yeah, you can try to teeter on that. And again, like, there could be a need and a necessary need for a transitionary period where you can't just go from eating something to not eating something completely. I don't think that that's completely true for most individuals, but that's just my opinion on the matter. But even a slight decrease leading to a complete elimination, you're going to see benefits all along that sliding scale all the way down. As opposed to if you were doing it in the opposite direction, you'd probably see, a obvious increase in likelihood of these things, and increase to where you probably definitely will experience at least one of these things if consumption is at a very, very, very high rate.
Lower cancer mortality by 11% and a 24% reduced risk of type 2 diabetes. We spend tens of billions of dollars a year trying to tweak risk factors by about this magnitude. And this one intervention, a reduction in meat consumption, appears to do all those things at the same time. There are statin drugs that can reduce heart disease risk, but actually increase risk for type 2 diabetes and have little effect on cancer. If there was a drug that did as much for your health, it would be a multi-billion-dollar blockbuster. The chair of nutrition at Harvard estimates a moderate reduction in red meat consumption could prevent 200,000 deaths per year. Now, the meat panel can call that a very small effect if they want to, but I imagine it's no small effect to those 200,000 families. The numbers they found is on par with the amount of cancer and heart disease attributable to secondhand smoke, and based on the same kind of studies, population studies. It's not like they randomize people to sit in smoky rooms all day for a couple years, but no rational person who looks at the public health data around the effectiveness of smoke-free zones would argue that people should continue exposing themselves to secondhand smoke, so why do the same for red meat and processed meat? The smoking analogy is actually a good one. Imagine researchers select studies with extremely small between-group differences in the number of cigarettes smoked per week. They avoid any studies that actually compare smoking to non-smoking, i.e. meat eating to vegetarian. They find that despite the small differences in exposure, there is still a clear and consistent benefit to smoking less. They then apply methods of grading the evidence that strongly favor randomized trials over all other methods. Since there are few, if any, randomized trials of smoking, they conclude that they have very low confidence in the reliability of their own findings. On that basis, they published guidelines recommending that the public simply continue to smoke. After all, they reasoned, people who smoke like smoking. That really does sum up the Annals papers in a nutshell.
That's wild.
That reminds me of a quote from a famous paper published in 1958, compiling all the most poignant evidence linking smoking and lung cancer after coming up against those same charges of inadequate proof. This quote could just as well have been written about the state of science on meat today. If the mountain of evidence they found had been made on some new agent, to which hundreds of millions of adults had not already been addicted, and on one which did not support a large industry skilled in the arts of mass persuasion, the evidence for the hazardous nature of the agent would be generally regarded as beyond dispute.
Wow. That's all I can say is wow. Run that quote back. If the findings had been made on a new agent to which hundreds of millions of adults were not already addicted, and on one which did not support a large industry skilled in the arts of mass persuasion, the evidence for the hazardous nature of the agent would be generally regarded as beyond dispute. And again, I want to run through this and insert words into this. So bear with me. We're gonna do a deep dive into this meeting. So prepare. If the findings have been made on meat, to which hundreds of millions of adults were not already addicted to meat, and on one which did not support a large industry, which meat does, skilled in the arts of mass persuasion, which the large industry, meat packing and processing, definitely has, not only persuasion of uh, not even persuasion in the form of their food tasting good, but persuasion in the way that they advertise said food in a particular way, and then also scientifically engineer other types of foods in order for you to become more addicted. The evidence for the hazardous nature of meat would be generally regarded as beyond dispute. And again, even in this statement, there's a difference between what individuals generally regard and what is actually the truth. So, this statement even goes as far as to still be like, well, it's about the public opinion over the actual science, and I disagree. So, so let's go ahead and move to another video looking at the difference between animal protein and plant-based protein. The other videos didn't talk about or compare the two, so I want to kind of split it up by talking about them in comparison to each other instead of just looking at one in isolation to itself and then the other in isolation to itself. So we're going to look at the comparison side by side from the nutritionfacts.org point of view of animal protein versus plant-based protein.
In 2019, Dr. David Katz and colleagues, including one of my favorite researchers, David Jenkins, published a public health case for modernizing the definition of protein quality. The prevailing definition seems to have more to do with biochemistry than the net effects on human health. The popular concept that protein is good and the more the better, coupled with a protein quality definition that favors animal protein, fosters the impression that eating more meat, eggs, and dairy is desirable, preferable. But this is directly opposed to nutrition guidelines that are instead trying to push more plants. Although protein malnutrition is still prevalent in many areas of the world, it is exceedingly rare in the industrialized world, where the most formidable public health threat is not something like kwashiorkor, protein-calorie malnutrition, but from chronic diseases. In 2016, a landmark study was published out of Harvard involving more than 100,000 people that found that replacing animal protein with plant protein was associated with lower risk of dying prematurely. The worst seemed to be processed meat like bacon, as well as egg protein, the egg whites, but swapping in even just 3% plant protein for any of the animal proteins, processed meat, unprocessed meat, chicken, fish, eggs, or dairy, was associated with a significantly lower risk of, arguably the most important endpoint of all, death. Yeah, but how do we know it's the protein? The researchers adjusted for factors such as saturated fat intake, which suggested it wasn't just the animal fat. Okay, but how does your body even know the difference between protein from a plant and protein from an animal? I mean, isn't protein protein? No. Unlike animal protein, plant protein is generally low in branched-chain amino acids, for example, and decreased consumption of branched-chain amino acids improves metabolic health. It could be the IGF-1, a cancer-promoting growth hormone that is boosted by so-called high-quality animal protein intake, though. We suspect the IGF-1 connection is cause and effect, since people who are born to have higher IGF-1 levels, regardless of what they eat, do appear to suffer higher rates of killers like type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Or it could be something the Harvard researchers didn't control for, such as toxic pollutants like dioxins and PCBs, since they tend to accumulate up the food chain in cattle, pigs, chickens, and fish, and therefore end up on our plates.
Hey, what's up? You say you're just here to learn? Hey, I'm just here to teach. So, if you want to sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride, we learn about how to eat and how to eat just a little bit more better.
So plant-based protein also stands as an important step to lower the body burden of harmful pollutants. If you don't think 100,000 people are enough, how about 400,000 people? The NIH AARP study is the largest diet cohort study in history. And again, simply swapping 3% of calories from various animal protein sources with plant protein was associated with 10% decreased overall mortality. And you get even twice that benefit if you get rid of eggs, too. That's not a surprise, since egg consumption is associated with a higher risk of developing cardiovascular disease. put all the studies together on dietary protein intake and mortality, and people who eat more protein tend to live shorter lives, but this is mainly driven by the harmful association of animal protein. Plant protein intake is inversely associated with mortality, meaning those who eat more plant protein tend to live longer lives.
I just bought some damn soul food. Hey, enjoy it, man. Because again, like it's interesting that you bring that up, because as soon as you say the words soul food, immediately you start thinking about great grandmamas and aunties and the ones that throw down in the kitchen. That got the extra. They got a little bit extra love around their hips and their elbows, just a little bit. But the food comes from a place of love. And so just like, how I'm talking about this, like you don't have to lose the idea of soul food. Like, and if anything, I would say, and my argument would be, the most soulful soul food, so to speak, would be one that also provides not only just, the happiness and the togetherness that soul food brings as far as like, the nostalgia and the memories and everything like that, but also bringing the health as well. And I think when you ship it all together like that, that becomes more of a powerful nucleus than learning that unfortunately the way that you may be cooking for your family, or you know, provide the food that you provide that you're making out of complete and utter love is or could be or is a major factor in, a negative health outcome for someone. And that's a really, really tough position to be put into. But there has to be some kind of break in that chain in that way. You can't continue to want to have culturally a certain type of food, but there's always a different way that you can go about preparing it, adding other things to it, subtracting certain things, making sure that all areas are being met as far as macro and micronutrients. So there are ways of going about, keeping staple foods that are popular, but then you start getting into the amount of the consumption and how much it is and how frequent and, moderation versus overconsumption. So it can be really, really difficult when you start saying like, oh, well, no, you don't have to give it up, but you may only can have it like 2 times a month max. Like it's really that type of situation where it's like, if you really don't want to give it up, this is kind of what you have to do in order to, counterbalance. But we'll get back to the.
More animal protein may mean more mortality, whereas more plant protein is correlated with less mortality. So the best of both worlds would be to increase the intake of plant protein in place of animal protein. In other words, as another 2020 meta-analysis concluded, persons should be encouraged to increase their plant protein intake to potentially decrease their risk of death.
All right. So with that video going through and explaining animal protein versus plant protein, the differences there, that the idea is not necessarily that it's the protein itself that's an issue. It's comes down to what type of protein it is essentially. So not demonizing protein as being completely useless, but also not saying that all proteins are created equal. But in lieu of this, let's see. So we're going to continue on, and we're going to look at how a plant-based diet can help reduce racial health disparities. So here again, this is actually a fundraiser, and continue to be a fundraiser. Let's see, support Dr. Greger's work. Individual donations keep us going. Help us life-changing information with a donation of any size. Donations collected. Our mission is to improve public health by providing the latest in evidence-based nutrition, health research in an accessible format. It's cool. It's currently $3,237 being raised with this video. It's really cool. Let's take a look at how a plant-based diet can help reduce racial health disparities.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, the death rate for African Americans was as much as 6 times higher than white America.
Crazy.
The higher black pandemic deaths placed a harsh spotlight on their long-standing higher mortality and diminished longevity in general. Unfortunately, diminished African American life expectancy predates the COVID-19 pandemic by decades. The black-white death gap for women is about 3 years, and for men, closer to 5 years. The COVID-19 death disparities may have to do with limited access to healthy food in predominantly black communities, the housing density, the need to work or else, the inability to practice social distancing, but also the underlying burden of ill health. Increased COVID-19 mortality and complications occur more often in individuals with pre-existing conditions like hypertension, obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, comorbidities that are more prevalent in African Americans. More high blood pressure, more diabetes, more strokes, and more likely to die at early ages from all causes. But
That is why, like, let's see. African Americans are more likely to die at early ages from all causes. Death per 100,000 people. Red bar being African American. So, if I'm reading this chart correctly, we're looking at between the ages 18 to 34. So this is death per 100,000 people. African Americans outranked there at 142 to 100. Age 35 to 49, the gap widens. So you have death per 1,000, 312 to 220. And then the gap is, I wouldn't say it's double, but it's definitely 1.5 times between the ages of 50 to 64. And those categories, again, just are consistent with high blood pressure, diabetes, stroke. This is with African Americans and whites include Hispanic and non-Hispanic origin as well. So they're even taking a bigger pool than what they could have had. So, yeah.
put together.
This was a statistic in 2015. So, fortunately, I feel like this number has only gotten worse.
The question is why? Why do black Americans live sicker and die younger than their white counterparts? Well, one big factor is socioeconomic status. In the United States, race is closely tied to class, with African Americans about twice as likely to be living in poverty. On average, education levels are lower as well. However, even among African Americans whose socioeconomic status is comparable to that of whites, despite the higher education and more socioeconomic resources, health outcomes are still poorer. Part of that has to do with lifestyle behaviors. For example, fewer than 5% of African American adults met physical activity guidelines. Smoking rates are actually comparable, though African Americans tend to be exposed to more secondhand smoke and have lower quit rates. This may be because they're more likely to use menthol cigarettes, which enhance the addictive potential of nicotine.
I didn't know that. One hypothesis for the lower quit rates among African Americans than whites is that they are more likely to use menthol smoking products, which enhance the addictive potential of nicotine. I had no idea that was a thing. That's yeah, because they be smacking on them packs of meth.
Why menthols? Because tobacco companies target the marketing of mentholated products to African Americans.
Crazy.
Black lives, black lungs.
Wow.
Similarly, if you look at food messages on African American television shows, not only does black prime time contain a greater number of food commercials, African American audiences may be receiving nearly 3 times as many advertisements for low nutrient junk, such as candy and soda.
Now, this, I feel like I've definitely noticed that there's a difference because I watch different I watch all different kinds of sports. So from football, basketball, I don't really care too much for baseball, track and field stuff, and all these other things. But I feel like when I'm watching the NBA, the National Basketball Association, no matter what, where I'm watching it from, where the broadcast may be like different. So say like it's local to Dallas, or it's local to Houston, versus it being local to Los Angeles or any other state, where you see different different commercials at different times. But I feel like during the NBA games, which I have to say, there's definitely a lot more presence of African Americans in that sport, and make up probably a larger percent per capita of the audience of that being African Americans. It's like back to back to back to back to back with the food commercials, and they're always chains or some kind of new candy or some soda or something like that, where again, like, you're pairing together like the athlete themselves with like Sprite or whatever it may be, or Taco Bell or McDonald's. But it's just over and over and over again. And then you also start seeing like the rap culture start to creep in there with, again, the Cardi B meal and all that, like at McDonald's. Like, it's like I never realized it, obviously, until like you just kind of take a step back from being in like that consumer content bubble. But and then also me just not really watching like cable television to really kind of like look at the advertisements. And there was a long time where I was like, I'm not seeing any ads, because I was watching things that either didn't have ads or had an ad blocker or whatever it was, so I wasn't seeing it. But then you start to notice, once certain programs and platforms started to show advertisements a lot more. And when they did, I just started noticing it's like KFC, McDonald's, Taco Bell, rinse and repeat, and then maybe a Chick-fil-A one, and then Sour Patch Kids, candy, milk, something chocolatey, something sugary, alcohol. Like, so it's like there's really no reprieve from that. And if it's not that, then they're talking about a show, and then you go back to the sporting event, and then the sporting event, more food advertisement, McDonald's, this halftime shows sponsored by Sprite. And it's just like, yeah, it's just all over the place. But we're talking about a sporting event. Like, this is an athletic event, and we're talking about foods that are not synonymous with athletic performance in any kind of way. It's crazy.
That may be one reason why African Americans tend to consume fewer fresh fruits and vegetables and are more likely to eat junkier foods. Of course, where are you going to get those fresh fruits and vegetables? There are fewer supermarkets located in black neighborhoods compared with white neighborhoods, as in 4 times fewer supermarkets.
And this is why, I'm sorry for pausing so much, but this is why a lot of the times it's not just I know, and this is like, the empathetic side of me, but it's like I know that there's more to it than just wanting to eat differently. I understand that so much, like the just wanting to eat differently, but not having ways of doing so, or doing your best to do so with your situation. And so that's why a lot of the health outcomes, they're not a coincidence. They're not a whoopsie. This is by design. This is what happens when you're neglecting communities. This is what happens when you have, or you allow for certain businesses to want to try to go be with their clientele and leave the neighborhood desolate for any other options. And a corner store becomes their option, or a gas station. A gas station becomes the only place where they can get a hot meal. Like, that's crazy and that's ridiculous. But a lot of people end up being in those food apartheid situations where there's just no access to anything other than prepackaged deli meats, processed foods, and junk food. And after a while, you just say, well, it's not going to change, so I'm going to get used to eating these things. And then you get the resatisfaction that these things, you're going to find some bad things that are going to taste really good. And then boom, there's no motivation to try to do anything differently, because you don't have any other option. You don't have any choice. And now your body is having to try to find a way to deal with what it is that you're putting in it. And some individuals will have certain reactions and others will have others. Their body will perform in the way that it can with what it's given. And this is going to primarily going to be the outcome. Lesser longevity and life expectancy overall. It becomes a form of weaponized nutrition at a certain point. Like there becomes a certain point where you have to say, like, when does it become you have access to being able to provide everyone with basic needs, and when you just don't do that, when that neglect becomes very egregious and racist.
What black neighborhoods do excel in, though, is fast food. Predominantly black neighborhoods have 60% more fast food restaurants per square mile compared to predominantly white neighborhoods. Now, of course, dietary behaviors alone do not fully explain the significant differences in diet-related disease patterns between racial groups. There are differences in employment and poverty and home ownership and healthcare access.
Yeah. Some social factors of health risk affects African Americans at younger ages. Unemployment, 13% versus 6% from 18 to 34. 8% versus 4% from 35 to 49 years old. 5% to 3% from 50 to 64 years old. Even obesity rates, being non-active, smoking. There's an age where it kind of looks like it, you're got a little battle it out, but it's like all these, what could be viewed as negative markers. It's like, why are we leading in all these things? It's such a small fraction of the population. Like, why are we leading in all these things?
All of which can affect outcomes. But while there are certainly many social and economic factors such as racism and income inequality that contribute to health disparities, there is good evidence that simply eating a more plant-based diet could help eliminate disparities in cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Here's the diabetes data. Even after controlling for education, income, physical activity, and even BMI, non-blacks eating strictly plant-based diets had 57% lower odds of diabetes, and among black...
I don't like the way it always hits my ear wrong hearing it, but non-blacks.
Vegans, it was even more striking,
I don't like
70% lower odds. And that was after taking BMI into account. So even at the same weight, black vegans had 70% lower odds of diabetes than black omnivores. And the racial disparity is only about half that, 36%. So the increased risk of diabetes among black participants was on the order of 1/3, while the protection afforded by vegan diets in this subgroup was about 70%. Even just a vegetarian diet that includes still eating dairy and eggs may more than counteract the racial disparity in diabetes risk.
And they're not the same weight. African Americans have higher obesity rates, cutting their lifespans by 6 years. But black vegetarians and vegans have less than half the risk of obesity compared to those who eat meat. And this is after adjusting for differences in physical activity. So even at the same exercise levels, those eating more plant-based had but a fraction of the obesity risk.
Because that's a very good distinction there, because the idea that everyone is working out at the same rates on any particular eating lifestyle, diet, what have you, just doesn't make sense. So you're going to have those that have certain differing levels. Like, for instance, my level of physical activity, being a vegan, is probably extremely high in comparison to the average vegan, which may end up being just as sedentary as the average American. But because they're choosing to eat a completely different way, it is not necessarily making up for, but it is the difference between, being sedentary and also worsening conditions due to eating habits, as opposed to at least their eating habits are somewhat counteracting and counterbalancing the sedentary lifestyle. But at some point in time, that sedentary lifestyle is going to have to be addressed, because while nutrition is great and all, also moving your body and controlling the movement of your body through space is important as well for longevity and health as a human being. Like, there's nothing in our being that suggests that being sedentary for long periods of time is good for us. There are several studies that are stating that sitting is the new smoking. That sitting for as long as individuals do in front of computers, desks, TVs, whatever it may be, in vehicles, cars, and all this other stuff, all this time sitting down is not doing anyone any favors in the long term.
High blood pressure. In African Americans, hypertension is the most significant contributor to their increased cardiovascular disease burden and mortality, but Black vegetarians and vegans combined had 44% lower odds of hypertension, an important finding for Black individuals where hypertension is so prevalent, with no benefit found for those who cut out all other meat but continued to eat fish. And the same thing found for total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, cutting odds in half among Black vegetarians and vegans. As with non-blacks, the researchers conclude these results suggest that there are sizable advantages to a vegetarian diet in Black individuals. What about vegetarians versus vegans? The title gives it all away. Cardiovascular disease risk factors are even lower in African American vegans. This is something we've known about when Caucasian vegans have been compared to vegetarians. However, it was not known whether African American vegans exhibit a more favorable cholesterol profile until now. Significantly lower LDL cholesterol in vegans. Now, of course, the vegans were also significantly slimmer on average normal weight as opposed to the overweight vegetarians. But even after taking that into account, those eating more plant-based had significantly lower cholesterol. So there's a tremendous potential for plant-based diets to promote health among
I don't like when they do this, and there's no need for this. Why? Why does it have to say Blacks? Why is it titled The Potential for Plant-Based Diets to Promote Health Among Blacks Living in the United States? There's absolutely no reason why it should be worded like that, and why no one told them that it's a bad look for it to be titled like that. Oh my goodness.
Blacks living in the United States. In fact, they may have an even greater benefit. For example, African Americans have an excess burden of chronic kidney disease, not only because they have more high blood pressure and diabetes, but there are genetic factors. 8% to 12% of African Americans are carriers of the sickle cell trait, which places them at significantly higher risk of kidney disease. So while Blacks represent a relatively small fraction of the U.S. population, they account for more than a third of all patients on dialysis due to chronic kidney disease. And that's where plant-based diets can come in, shown to protect against both chronic kidney disease development as well as progression. 3/4 of Blacks are lactose intolerant too, so would again stand to benefit even more from eating plant-based. It is unacceptable that for decades the American healthcare system has failed African Americans and other minority communities in terms of helping to prevent some of our leading killers. But that just makes it all the more important for them to take the reins of their own health destiny.
The harms associated with eating more Southern style food. Don't let that rock on another. What? Where's the? But moving right along.
Can I tell you?
Look at with looking at everything that we looked at thus far. That last one kind of was a little bit more teetering on the health disparities, and then looking at health disparities through the lens of access to food. So, those outcomes are those outcomes because that's just how systematically and structurally situation for those individuals are. So, but we're gonna look at another format of not necessarily a debate, so to speak. It probably will more so uh, structure more like a conversation, but it's Gregor talking to whomever this is. I don't know who he may be talking about. We'll learn as the video plays. But Dr. Gregor, meat diet versus vegan diet. Is it better to eat meat or be vegan? This is a London reel, so we're gonna look at what they had to say here.
About my experience on plant-based last year, and then I want to get into the book a little bit more.
Okay.
So last year, I had someone sitting in that leather chair. His name was John Joseph. He's the lead singer of the hardcore punk band, the Cro-Mags. Been plant-based for 30-some years.
Amazing.
Because he was a Hare Krishna monk back in the day. And he's also done 10 of these Ironman races, which are these really long distance,
Insane.
12, 13-hour races where you swim and you bike and you run. And so he got in the chair and he was looking at me funny and he said, Brian, I want to challenge you to do a half Ironman. You got 90 days to train. And I was like, you must be crazy, because I had never done endurance training. I mean, I was in okay shape, but I had never done long distance swim or run or anything. And I said, okay, maybe. And then he said, but you're doing it on a plant-based diet. And I was like, what are you doing, John? There's a scene in the movie where he walks in my Airbnb in New York and I'm cooking eggs and bacon and he throws it in the trash and he takes me across the street and I'm drinking smoothies. And he said, Brian, you're going to not get injured. You're going to be a better performance. And I'm 47 years old at the same time. And I didn't believe him, but I like John a lot. And, he really knows his science. He has a great book called Meat is for Pussies, which, again, really kind of addressed this whole I got to eat meat as men. Yeah. And I appreciated him writing that book.
What? Meat is for what?
And getting in trouble for the title and all that stuff. Although apparently the publisher was their idea. Anyways, so I started eating plants. I told my wife, she freaked out. She's originally from Bulgaria where, she didn't know anything about plant-based diets. Sure. But she adopted and adapted, and all of a sudden she's making black bean quinoa nachos with vegan cheese, and we're rocking and rolling. And I first wasn't eating enough, so I was a little bit calorie deficit. But once I figured that out, I had a great experience. I ran the race, and I felt so good that I kept it up for the whole year. So a year I went plant-based. And towards the end of the year, I just asked myself this, Michael. I said, am I doing this because I'm dogmatic, or am I doing this because this feels like the best nutrition? And I have a history of doing things because I'm dogmatic, or doing things until they kill me. Drinking, drugs, being a banker.
How can you do those things until they kill you if you're still alive? I already don't. This guy already is kind of getting on my nerves a little bit.
So it's true. So I thought, why am I doing this? And I introduced some fish back into my diet and some grass-fed beef. And I just thought, you know what? I just don't know if it's the right nutrition.
This man said, I just want meat.
Source for me. Now, I am not doing a lot of that. I still eat a lot of plants, and I'm not eating cheeseburgers all the time.
Great.
But for me, I feel good with this diet. And I've had a lot of people that have been vegan here for 5 years that are actually now starting to experiment with some animal protein. So what do you think about that?
Well, it sounds like you're eating better than 99.9% of people out there, right? So that's fantastic.
You're probably right.
I mean, if there was one thing, if you were going to obsessively commit to one thing in your life, rather than alcoholism, I mean, a healthy diet. The number one cause of death.
I have a healthy diet. I'm just not 100% plant-based.
Right. Okay. But you could eat a healthier diet, right? And we could all eat a healthier diet, right? Every time, it's a zero-sum game. Every time we put something in our mouth, there's an opportunity cost. There's a lost opportunity to put something even healthier in our mouth. And this goes for anything, right? You eat a banana, you just had a lost opportunity to eat blueberries, which are healthier than a banana, right? So you just put one thing on oatmeal or another thing on your oatmeal.
Right.
And so that's when you say is X food healthy or not? Is grass-fed beef healthy? Compared to
relative to what?
Compared to bacon? Absolutely, right? Compared to chickpeas? Nah, that'd be hard, right? But so everything we eat we should just all try to nudge everything up. And if eating a little bit of animal protein is going to keep you eating all the other wonderful food in your diet, right? If just that psychologically, right, saying, well, I don't want to be one of them, right? And
it's not necessarily that.
Or look, I don't want to worry about holidays or whatever it is.
Yeah.
If that
on a day-to-day basis keeps you, stuffing your face with all those healthy whole plant foods, it's not what you eat today or tomorrow or birthdays, holidays, special occasions. It's what you eat day to day for like decades from now. What are you going to be in decades? So whatever makes it sustainable for you is the healthiest diet. Okay. So if that includes beef, and if otherwise, you would just like, forget
Screw
about it.
everything,
Like some people who go all in, these people like do the cold tofu kind of thing and like all in.
Cold tofu.
And they're like, wow, I feel so good about myself. But then
go cold tofu instead of saying going cold turkey.
6 months later, they're back eating cheeseburgers. Well, then maybe if they would have went slower and figured out how to make it work within their lives, make it convenient and then maybe they would have been doing this. So the 6 months aren't going to help them in the long run, right? So it's really about how, knowing your psychology and what's going to keep me in this for the long run, eating as many whole plant foods as possible. And that's really the crux. It's how many whole plant foods are you eating? That, if there's one question, and so it's not how much meat are you eating?
Right.
How many whole plant foods? Now, if you eat meat, you're kind of displacing, right? There's a certain number of calories and satiety that goes along with that. And so you're
going to have times where you're competing. Those calories are competing for something else. And whatever that something else is, if it not only comes with more calories, but also comes with, which usually what comes with more calories is more fat. And in animal products case, it's, processed meats being very, very fatty. There's that trade-off. That is, you're going to get to a point where it's like, well, if you want to eat 3 cheeseburgers, it's going to be very hard to eat 3 cheeseburgers followed up by 5 times that amount in fiber in order to counterbalance that. There's just not enough room, not only in your stomach, but there's just not room in your caloric expenditure to do something like that. So it becomes a zero-sum game, like what they're saying. If you could have traded this with something better, and if you didn't, there's always that next opportunity to do that. But at the same time, every time that you're going and making those decisions, just know that it's stacking up, and it's stacking up, and it's stacking up. So every time you decide to make a decision one way as opposed to another, that's either further delaying one outcome or expediting another.
You may end up at the end of the day eating less full. But in terms of health, it's how many whole plant foods you're eating, full stop. And the primary reason these other foods aren't good is because they may undercut your whole plant food consumption in addition to whatever else they have bad in them. So yes, some have saturated fat or trans fats or too much sodium or cholesterol, but part of the reason that they're unhealthful comparatively is because it's that bite for bite. It's that substituting one for another. And so if you're going to eat meat, make it the best meat, right? You're going to eat cheese, make it the expensive, really high-end cheese. There's people who are eating Velveeta and American cheese and they're just like, they don't even taste it. They're like watching TV, eating Kentucky Fried Chicken or something. It's like you're not even enjoying, you're hurting yourself. If you're going to hurt yourself, right? Then you might as well, right, have the best scotch or whatever, right? Then, but that's like the worst of both worlds. It's like you're not even deriving any pleasure from it, right? So look, if you're going to eat chocolate, eat some really good chocolate. And then it's going to be expensive. And so you're not going to get a lot of it. And it's going to be at a special occasion. And it's going to be, and your body can bounce back from intermittent insults. It's kind of the day-to-day stuff that really builds up.
Okay. Now, if I go out and shoot an elk and eat some wild elk, and that's a whole nother thing that gets me mad about. But are you definitively saying that is going to hurt me, having that meat, as opposed to having a whole food?
That's absolutely the healthiest. So elk and moose, 2% fat by weight. 2% fat. When you go to the store and it says extra lean, that's like 28% fat. That's the extra lean, right? Okay. 2%. So that is and so that's actually what chicken used to be in 1896. 2%. Now it's 23%, Damn. 10 times more fat. But yeah, so wild caught game without lead ammunition. That's critically important. If you shoot that elk with lead ammunition, it's a bad thing. But so copper jacketed, no lead. But yeah, venison. And so there's actually experiments done. Primarily, there's a research team in Australia where they compared eating wild meat, which is kangaroo there, but that's like their venison.
Right.
compared to conventional store-bought meat, saw significantly lower bump in postprandial inflammation after eating, significantly less inflammation in their blood within 4 hours after eating the kangaroo meat compared to conventionally bought meat. Now, you could argue, why eat anything pro-inflammatory at all? If you instead ate plant foods, you actually would have an anti-inflammatory reaction. Okay, fine, but if you're going to eat meat, that's absolutely the least harmful meat is the wild-caught meat.
Okay, fair enough. I am just not sure. I mean, look, I trust you as a doctor. You know what you're talking about. But also in the past, doctors have told us to smoke Lucky Strikes, to drink skim milk.
No.
So I'm just trying to listen to my body, and I'm trying to make a decision.
Don't trust me. Don't trust. No. We trust the science.
Okay.
Right. I mean, right. And so.
But you're 100% certain in your mind.
No. Well, so there's studies been done. So I talk about in the introduction to How Not to Die.
Yeah.
This study. That's the question. Well, like how much is too much, right? That's an unanswered research question. We don't know. There certainly is an amount that it's like there's no science in the world that says being a social smoker, picking up a few cigarettes at a party once or twice a year is going to hurt you. I mean, there's no science that shows those social smokers have any higher disease rates than people who don't smoke at all, right? Now we can show smoking a half pack a day, absolutely, right? Devastating, right? But there's some level at which your body should be able to just repair any DNA damage and, get rid of all that tar. And so it's like, okay, well, what is that level? And so I'm always interested in looking for those particular studies. Probably the best study to come to that was the study looking at Buddhist monks in Far East, where it was nice about these studies is that they live there all time and they get fed the same food every single day. And they have no access to junk food or external food, so they have highly controlled diet.
And this is super important because a lot of these studies out there, they ask people what they're eating. They don't even know what they're eating.
Right, or they say, "I'm going to put you on this diet, put you on this diet," and there's no, and then if there's no difference, well, did you actually follow the diet? Compliance critically important. Even if you provide food, compliance can be miserable in dietary studies. There's these biomarkers you actually tell. I was just doing scripting a video looking at whole grains. And there's something called alkyl-resorcinol, which is something found in the bran layer and basically nowhere else in the food supply. So you can measure the blood supply and see if people are actually eating it. And so they gave people whole grains to replace these with, and people just took them, throw them out. Because, I mean, there's like half of the people, they didn't comply at all. And so when the result, so all that money, all those resources, all completely useless because they didn't actually comply with the dietary. Okay, so that's why, these kind of studies are nice. Now, this wasn't a randomized study, but there were these two monasteries, and one was completely plant-based, and the other one had meat. If I remember correctly, it was like, for men, it was like one serving every 2 days, and for women, it was like one serving every 5 days, or something like that. So not meat every day, neither group ate, but they seemed to differ. Their diets seemed to differ, and they lived there decades. It's really nice kind of natural experiment that's set up. And so if you would have came to me and asked, predict what the study results will be, and someone was eating meat, one serving of meat every 3 days, I'm like, there's not going to be any difference. If you would have asked me, I would have predicted that you're not going to see any kind of end maybe some risk factor stuff. You're not going to see actual, end.
You're not going to see any major differences. The difference would be negligible is essentially what he's trying to say. That you'll look at the study, you'll find that with such infrequent amounts of meat consumption, there should be negligible, if not basically immeasurable sources that you can find that, there's differences between those two diets.
Points like disease risk.
Okay.
With that time, I bet your body can bounce back from that.
Before you saw the movie Game Changers, because you're eating one burrito in Game Changers, you got your blood's messed up, and you can't get an erection.
Okay, so now, all right,
but you didn't think necessarily.
I was skeptical that they would be able to see, and they found remarkable difference. I forget I think it was like twice the diabetes rates in people eating just a few servings a week. That was really surprising. And so, so that may be too much, but is one serving a week bad? We just don't know. I mean, the data isn't that granular to really get down there. And ideally, we'd actually have randomized data over long term to actually put it to the test and prove it. So all we really have is the best available balance of evidence, right? Does that mean it's necessarily good evidence? No. It's just, this is the best evidence we have so far. And If it weren't so important, then who cares, right? But when it's literally the number one cause, so dietary risk, according to Global Burden Disease Study, in the UK, the number one killer of Brits is their diet. Smoking's now number two. And think of all the resources, the regulations that go into getting people to quit smoking, right? No, but that's killer number two. Why isn't that same amount of
killer number one
resources being poured into getting people to improve their diet? And there is some, certainly sodium levels have dropped. And the best population level experiment in the world was, this public-private partnership with the UK government, went to the restaurant industry, dropped sodium levels across the board in a playing field, and you saw a dramatic drop in stroke rates, improvements in blood pressure. Really, it's
That's
a
cool.
success
I wanna look
story,
at
what's
that.
being done here. But, nothing compared to what really could be done. So number one killer is the British diet. Just like number one killer in America is standard American
But it's
diet.
such a personal thing that if the government starts to regulate that, it's a different thing if you look at cigarettes, because most people would admit that a cigarette is probably harmful to you. Now,
but
I know.
not before.
Right.
And the science was clear at the time when people were saying, smoking in moderation is fine. When that's not what the science showed. And we were in a similar situation here, where the science is over here, but the public proclamations are far from it.
Well,
I see what he's trying to set up right here. And I feel like you'll hear a lot the comparison to the smoker thing, because that's something that is still an ongoing battle now. It was an ongoing battle then. The producers of the product knew the scientific risk and chose to bury the conclusion. And you got certain medical professionals to be in line with it as well, and even promoted to a large degree. Even had advertisers advertising it, even advertising to children as well. So yeah, it's like it's not going to be easy, and it's obviously not going to be as transparent or as clean cut as you may want it to be. But we're fighting that same battle now with this, and these comparisons are just, it's hard to shake these comparisons because we understand that now. We or at least we have a better understanding of that process and what that looks like, even though it's still a large situation, a large issue.
tobacco lobbies didn't help.
And just like the food industry lobbies aren't helping
Right.
now.
So there should be more being done to educate the public, since it's
Absolutely.
the biggest killer right
Right,
now.
right. But I like what the British government did is they didn't leave it up to the public. Is they're just going to decrease the sodium levels. And look, you can still salt your nuggets all you want, but the fact that chicken nuggets have like half the sodium here that they do in the United States is because Burger King was dropping their sodium too. So no one can kind of out-salt their competitors. They brought the population level sodium levels down, stroke rates came down, and look, you want to pour the whole salt shaker on it? That's up to you. It's easier to add salt to food than to remove salt from food, right?
Yeah.
So then that puts the power in the consumer. So
Yeah, like, I love this argument because it's like, yes, when if there are things that you can try to control, why not try to take control of them? And so just like with adding iodine to salt and then subsequently infusing lots of things with salt, ironically, you solve a problem while a lot of the population they continue living their daily life and making decisions, but the immediate decisions that they can choose from are already inherently better. That they don't have the option of choosing something that's bad, which I think everyone would want. Like, that's the reason why we want certain regulations on certain industries. And to a degree, we want food to be regulated. Obviously, safety standards, health standards, cleanliness, all these things that, will make or break whether or not you're going to go and eat at an establishment. That should also extend to the nutritional profile of the food too. I don't know why it doesn't. Why is that not also a regulation, just like checking off the box that you didn't have 2 allergens, you didn't have peanuts in your restaurant in a no peanut zone due to allergies? Like, when you've noticed that a certain product is causing a certain health outcome, how come that product's not banned? Doesn't make sense.
it seems a little big brothery that they're getting all the restaurant chains to decrease their salt, but No, that's in fact empowering consumers to determine the levels of salt that they want to do. They can always add more. They can't take out less.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is important. Again, like you can add, but you can't take away. All right. Where was that? What? Did I not put it on here? Okay, so let's now look. Let's now look at another actual debate kind of situation. We have vegans versus meat eaters. What is the right diet? It's a Jubilee video or middle ground. And so we're going to take a look at this. Now, this could go any way, which way. I don't know what these panels are or the backgrounds of the individuals on these panels of this video. So, hopefully, looking at this and assessing it, maybe there are going to be things that I agree with or disagree with, but, we'll see.
What are you putting in your body? Dead, carcass, pain, suffering, fear.
Brought vegans and meat eaters together to spark dialogue about their differences and similarities.
Can I have all of my vegans go into that pool of light and my non-vegans in that pool of light? First statement.
I already like the the black guy. He's a meat eater.
Taste plays a big factor in my eating choices.
Oh, most definitely. I agree. Taste.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely.
that's a huge thing for me. I think it's one of my weaknesses, actually. Like butter, salt, it's one of my weaknesses.
I love food. And I think my relationship with food actually deepened when I became vegan. I don't think I appreciated it as much as I did before I was vegan. My name is Aubrey Davis, and I have been vegetarian for 24 years and vegan for 13 years.
I believe that humans are the top of the food chain.
Humans are the top of the food chain. Yes. No.
Is a human at the same level
No.
of equivalence as like a fish?
Right.
That's probably a big reason why I'm not vegan anymore.
Right.
Is I didn't see that I had to see myself at a moral equivalent of a fish. And it gets into moral questions like, why should we have a pet that's a dog rather than eat the dog? And I think the most important question is, why should I love my neighbor rather than eat my neighbor?
What? Why? What?
Why should we have a pet that's a dog rather than eat the dog? And I think the most important question is, why should I love my neighbor rather than eat my neighbor? My name's Steve Michalski. I was a vegan for a year.
And now you're a cannibal? Have you found the answer to your question as to why you should love your neighbor as opposed to eating your neighbor? Have you solved your crisis of hierarchy of animals, Steve?
I was a vegetarian for 2 years. I'm a meat eater now. I've been so for over 5 years.
Like, I don't even see, what is a food chain, you know what I'm saying? That's just some construct some guy made and put a little diagram and put us human beings in the top, so.
I don't think it's a question of whether we're at the top. I think it's a question of what do you do with that? If you have a more conscious energy than an animal, what do you do with that power? Do you choose to take a life, or do you choose to live in love?
That's definitely a different way of looking at it. If you have the energy of consciousness, Do you choose to take a life or live in love? And then also that the food chain is just a diagram created by an individual that just said this eats that. So that then created a arbitrary food chain. Interesting viewpoints.
I put a lot of thought into my meals.
I don't put a lot of thought into
The
my
way
meals.
I support my body and my health is extremely important. I don't find that I can function at my best, either healthy, productive, emotionally stable, or intellectually capable, unless I have a lot of proper nutrients in my diet. 6 years ago, I became vegan because I got sick. I started to realize that my health was directly attached to what I ate. Since then, my friends and family have supported me to feeling better, and I'm better than I was before I got sick.
I don't really like cook or anything, so I don't really put too much thought into what I eat, I guess.
I live a fast pace, kind of like I'm working late nights or I'm waking up early, so sometimes it's easier to grab this quick processed sandwich, or I wish I planned my meals out more. I think I would feel a lot better.
I think it's really powerful no matter what you're eating to put your intentions into, whether it's prayer, invocation, and it's just such great power and presence versus just like scarfing something down, but like, can I just really be present with this meal, take my time and chew it slowly? So that's the first thing that I resonate with and what I choose to do.
I would kill an animal.
No.
I think there'd be tons of contexts where I'd kill an animal. Like if a lion's going to go kill a baby, I'd probably kill an animal. I'd kill an animal to save a human life, and I get that vegans probably wouldn't do that.
If I could do something to prevent killing them, besides eating them, like if I was protecting myself and we had like something that we could do to get that animal away, I would definitely try to not kill it. I mean, I feel
But if
like
it comes down to you or the animal, you killing the animal?
I would.
No, they're going to give up their life for the fish.
Why is it always the
But think about
extreme
this.
case when talking about would I kill an animal? Like,
exactly.
if you were in this
There
situation.
aren't lions running around downtown LA.
When I was into hiking, there's mountain lions that come and kill people. You've known that, right? That's in
Yes,
Orange County,
totally.
right? That's not in the jungle in
It's not
Africa.
an everyday situation of
but-
would you kill an animal?
But it's Orange County. Mountain lions have
Wow.
killed hikers, kids. Would
Totally.
you just let them? No, let the kid
Yes,
die.
we're hiking in the mountains and there's a mountain lion. I have to be aware of the fact that I'm in mountain lion territory and be like, I'm okay with the risk. Because to be honest, I'm not hiking with a gun. I have no way to defend my friend.
You don't hike with a hiking pole?
I mean, a
I
hiking
don't
pole
hike,
against
I
a
don't-
mountain lion?
I don't think you're winning.
I just want to say, like, even if I did, and even if my attempt were to be successful, I would feel awful having killed the mountain lion.
Well, your feelings are your foundation then for your beliefs then.
100%. Are human beings animals?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
Would you kill another human being to save another human being?
Yes.
What makes one person more valuable to another? Is it your relationship to that person?
It would,
Yeah.
it would probably be.
Yep.
So if, for example, I raise an animal in the wild, it's like an animal I've built a relationship with, and that animal now threatens the life of a human being that I don't know, but I've known that animal its entire life. What makes killing that animal as just cause okay as opposed to saving that life? I have a longer relationship with that animal. Why would I kill the animal before I'd save that person? Because it's about relationship.
You kill a person over an animal. That's
Correct.
Just how, yeah.
Because I believe human beings are animals.
Now, I see humans at a different level, but
Interesting. He sees humans as animals, and he used that argument to just prove that obvious. Like, to a lot of individuals, yes, it has everything to do with the proximity to me, my relationships, my experiences, like my. That's the entire reason why there's this debate, and the debate stops at when you start talking about an individual's morals and principles and all the the values and stuff like that. That's where it starts to break down. That's why that side of the argument is one thing, where you have the other side of the argument, which is the health benefits to the individual, and where you have you can do this while that also you can chew gum while walking, and so this helps while also helping this other ecosystem. Help me, help you, help us as opposed to I'm just going to consume for myself, while also being detriment to my health. I'm also the detriment of the health of multiple animals that I'm eating as well.
Maybe you value fish at the same level as a person. We see it very different.
I do.
It costs more than it should to eat healthy.
True. I think it costs more than it should to eat in general, so I say yes.
It's more expensive to eat healthy. I don't think it's too expensive. Farmer's market is something that I'm trying to frequent more, but sometimes, you know, you can go spend $20 here and definitely not get as much. I definitely want to see that. You know, maybe that'll encourage people to eat a little healthier. If you can go grab that fresh fruit, those fresh veggies for $5, $10, you know?
I think our culture as a society is just ingrained towards like the fast food culture, which is cheap and accessible. But now I think we have more of a established like medical basis on what's healthy and what's not healthy. And to get that content and to have it be tasty as well is expensive.
I'm running in. I have so much to say. It does not cost more money to be vegan. That is a myth.
Well, I don't think anyone is saying that. They're just saying it's more healthy to eat. It's more expensive to eat healthy in general, which to an extent it is and can be depending on, again, your access. And because we can't just say, oh, like this would be so much easier if we could say, well, everyone has the same access. Like everyone has access to everything. So now we can really just say, is the cost the only thing that's really kind of keeping people outside of wanting to eat a particular way? But we can't, because we know about food apartheid and not having access. So then it becomes more expensive, not necessarily at the register, you checking out with your beans and rice, but by way of the gas station, because you had to drive 20 miles outside of your home in order to get to the food. So I feel like I know what she's gonna say as far as like, you know, the staples are the cheapest. I've said stuff like that before, but that only comes at the way of, again, like, do you have easy access? Do you have cheap access to it? And cheap in the way of, I don't have to drive so far, so I don't have to spend as much gas and, you know, and put all this taxing on my car and my vehicle in order to get these foods. So there's different things that can make the bottom line of getting healthy food or food in general more expensive, other than just the price that you get at the grocery store. But if they're just arguing about the price of the grocery store, that then just becomes, why is the grocery store able to charge more if you're at a convenience store's rice versus the rice at the grocery store? Why? If it's the same Minute Maid rice, why is it $5 at this gas station and $2 at the grocery store? That's more so the conversation that should be had, rather than the, you know, is it more expensive to eat vegan versus meat? Meat tends to be more expensive depending on cut, all those other ins and outs. We really just have to first focus on access, in my opinion.
It takes planning. Yes, the convenience is less. Can you grab a hamburger at McDonald's? For sure. For
Convenience is an expense.
99 cents, but how much lentils can you buy? The issue is capitalism. Like,
I mean, I agree.
That is what is keeping us where we are. It's not that humans are smarter and they're going to come up with this technology. The technology exists. It is there. We can feed so many people. It is capitalism and factory farming.
And most of these companies that are selling us products that are like shitty food, they don't give a fuck about you at all, period. Someone's sitting on an island somewhere.
Oh yeah.
Like just stacking bread.
And they're
all
probably
this fast food
stacking
shit.
bread.
Yeah,
And they're probably eating real good.
They probably don't touch
products.
it. Yeah.
They're not eating any of that shit.
You go to certain neighborhoods, certain areas, you don't see the same fast food. You don't see the same restaurant. And it's all for a reason. They know
Accessibility.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. It's like they don't have, why is there many health food stores in the hood? How come I can't like get an option? Why is there a liquor store everywhere?
Exactly.
And it's true. It's like when you break it down, there's like malicious intent to deharmonize and like lower the vibration of certain people and certain areas. And it's like, that's a part of it too. It's like, what am I contributing to?
True.
I'll say this, you know, when I was 11 years old, my father passed away from his second heart attack. He was diabetic, he was pissing out of a tube. I watched him deteriorate my youngest years of my life for like years and years, just deteriorate, taking pharmaceutical drugs and just kind of basically dying slowly because of what he chose to eat. To me, I'd rather spend an extra $1 and eat organic or something healthy now and live longer than try to cut corners when, you know,
I'm with you. Like, make the choice now instead of later.
And again, I hate to be, you know, that guy, but I'm going to be that guy. It's easy to just say, just spend the extra $1 when you have the extra $1 to spend. That's, you know, what extra $1 means. But I know that they're saying if you're going to spend the $5 on McDonald's anyway, you could spend and you have access to not spend the $5 in that way, but you can spend it, say, on $5 worth of lentils. That obviously would go a lot longer way nutritionally than the latter. But yeah, it's like not everyone has access to the extra $1. And then we're talking about access and all those other things. And it's like, yeah, when you start getting into individual barriers become barriers for everyone. Because it's not just a barrier for me, it's a barrier for me and you because we're in the same situation, we're in the same boat.
Because my mom was the same thing. She died. She was eating buckets of ice cream when she passed away. She died at 49 years old.
Wow.
Now, choose now.
The more education that we can put out there, just like stuff like this is beautiful. That's what I was most anxious about, is learning more of what I'm trying to step into. I don't know if I'll ever give up chicken. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I don't know. I want to eat a lot cleaner chicken.
Do you guys have like cheat days ever?
No, I hate this question. Like when you're eating a particular way and it's a lifestyle, like there's not a cheat day. Like that's like me being like, oh bro, like you a meat eater, do you cheat and eat spinach? Like do you cheat sometimes and eat some tofu on the side? Like or be even more egregious. Oh, do you cheat on your non-human diet by just, you know, you snack on somebody's ankle right quick? Like, it sounds as ridiculous as it is because it is ridiculous. But it's like, no, there's not a cheat day. And if there is a cheat day, you're just not a vegan. You're not a vegetarian. You're not a whatever it is. There's no half-stepping, which is a great segue to what we're going to talk about next because I think it's going to be hilarious. But, yeah, like, what do you mean a cheat day?
Hell no. I am vegan 100% at the front line, ethical reasons, always, always, always. And that's why I don't think in 24 years I've ever gone back.
It was hard to try new things I didn't like, found tons of vegan food that I was like, oh God, what the fuck are you people eating? And then simultaneously realizing that there was options, you know, there's always choices and it's always choices we make. Like you said, you may never give up meat fully, but it's like you're making a choice. You're at least thinking for yourself and making a decision, and like that's all you can ask people to do is think for themselves.
True.
I really appreciate each.
All right. Well, it's all fine and dandy, but yeah. And again, he didn't really even talk about what the right diet is as far as the actual foods themselves. It's just more so, what is your idea and why are you wanting one person to eat a particular way over another way? Didn't really get into the diet itself, but that's fine. So that is a great segue into looking at this new diet that just like I was searching and looking at different diets and foods and stuff like that, and I kept scrolling through and I saw paleo, and then I saw keto, I saw the Atkins diet, I saw the DASH diet, you know, all the famous diets and stuff like that. But then I saw a diet that I had never seen, and I was like, I need this to be explained to me because I didn't learn about this. Like, what is this? So we're gonna look at I think it's Pegan. If it's pronounced Pegan, I'm gonna be so mad. But if it's pronounced Pegan, that's also gonna be very confusing. So I don't know which way. It's saying it's a paleo vegan hybrid, which just sounds like a normal. It's like it can't. How can you be both paleo and vegan? It doesn't make sense. But let's see.
Today we're going to do paleo mashed up with vegan. And to introduce us to that thought process is Dr. Mark Hyman. Please welcome him back to our show. He's answering the question of what to eat and how to eat with a book that I think is so cleverly titled, Food, What the Heck Should I Cook? That's his latest book. It's so cute. What a great, great title. What a great concept.
So it's basically focusing on eating real whole foods,
Okay.
plant-rich,
All right.
and using good quality. Because food is not just
Okay.
calories, Rachel. It's information. It's medicine. It literally speaks to every cell in your body and tells you to be healthy or be sick, be thin or be overweight. And it's so powerful when you understand how to use that. So we're going to talk about how to do this using the Pegan food pyramid.
Pegan.
So that's what we're looking at here.
Pegan. Okay, so it is what I thought it was and how it was pronounced. Pegan. Treats sparingly, gluten-free grains, half to 1 cup. Fruits and starchy vegetables, 1 cup of low glycemic fruit, half cup of starchy vegetables. Protein, 4 to 6 ounces of animal protein, up to 1 cup legumes. Healthy fats, 3 to 5 servings. Non-starchy veggies, herbs and spices, unlimited. I wish you can see my face right now. I know that you can't, but I wish you could see my face right now because I'm just face palming. Let's just see what he has. Let's just see what he has.
Right.
And here's the deal. We're going to go shopping at the pharmacy. That's pharmacy with an F. F-A-R-M-A-C-Y because pharmacy.
Get it?
Right?
Farm.
Right. This is where you should get
I
your
don't like
drugs.
this guy.
Okay?
Right.
And the first thing we're going to do is at the bottom of the pyramid
Pharmacy, because this is where you're gonna get your drugs.
is lots of non-starchy veggies, lots of color, because where the color is where the medicine is. And you can get unlimited refills, so you can as much
And if
as
you
you
eat
want.
a rainbow, you don't need to take a ton of pills.
No, you don't get all the colored pills.
Right.
Just eat the colored foods.
You need
right?
the colored foods.
Right. So we start with eggplant. When all the purples and dark colors are so good for you because they have anthocyanins, which are antioxidants. They help prevent aging. Cabbage is also great. It's also full of antioxidants. One of the best categories of foods. Lots of anthocyanins.
Lots of red cabbage. Any color cabbage, right? Cruciferous vegetables in general.
Cruciferous vegetables are great, and the broccoli, artichokes are amazing. Artichokes actually have powerful detoxifying compounds, and they have prebiotics that help fertilize all the good bugs in your gut. We know how important gut bacteria are to your health.
Well, why aren't you putting them in the basket here, Doc?
All right, we're going to make that. All right, a little broccoli. The next category of the pyramid, which is good quality fat.
Good quality fat. So I would imagine he's gonna pick up some nuts and seeds. Probably not peanuts. He probably will forego avocado because that's the ratio of that can be kind of wonky. Let's see what he goes for healthy fats.
Because people are afraid of fat. We got avocados, and you can.
First thing, avocado.
So trendy now. You can make chocolate pudding out of them.
Oh,
right?
Yes, you got to get Rachel's olive oil. Olive oil is a staple
I didn't think
fat.
they were gonna have oil later.
Other good fats, nuts and seeds are great fats, and also omega-3 fats, which we'll talk about with the protein in a minute.
Gotcha.
Okay, so now we're going to go back to get some protein. So come over here to my little
Proteinorama.
Proteinorama. So the thing about protein is you want quality, right? So there's a lot of different kinds of protein out there, but we want to stay away from the factory-farmed animals as much as possible.
True.
It's not good for you.
Even if you eat a animal diet, you really need to know where your food comes from.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad for you, it's bad for them, it's bad for the planet. It's one of the biggest causes of climate change and environmental destruction. So you want to have grass-fed meat, and you can get it cheap. There's resources in the book where you can
They
actually
sell sustainable seafood and grass-fed meats literally at Walmart and Target.
I disagree with that.
Yeah, exactly.
There is no
you can get a
excuse to
Costco.
not-
And then
exactly.
wild fish. Now, fish is really good because in protein you can get nutrients you can't get, for example, in vegetables. Like
Which obviously, on the Rachel Ray show or whatever this is, like they're not gonna be demonizing the food. They're gonna be talking it up, and then you have these brand names that are there. But as far as like sustainability and grass fed and all this other stuff, it's like, well, yeah, that's one thing, but you can't tackle factory farming as a reason to why everyone can't eat grass-fed beef, because if everyone did, the factory farming couldn't exist in the way that it does now. It wouldn't work this way. The reason why they stopped with this model was because they couldn't produce as much with this model, because this model obviously is slower, takes a lot more care, and that's why it's generally seen as being more expensive, because it takes more resources over a longer period of time to produce this, as opposed to producing a probiotic filled, cow that's been pumped full of cornmeal and steroids and hormones.
B12, there's a lot of extra antioxidants, there's high quality, dense protein. You have to eat 3 cups of
This is where it immediately stops being vegan. I don't know where this is like part vegan, part paleo. Like there's like you can't. To say one is to not be the other. So I don't know how they're crunching this together.
quinoa to get 4 ounces of steak,
lean steak, right?
And then fish is great too. So you want small fish. They're called the smash fish, sardines, mackerel, anchovies. So salmon's also good, wild salmon. Make sure you get sustainably raised if it's farmed. You won't want all the antibiotics. And pasture-raised chicken is also good. So pasture-raised pork, chicken, eggs, also great. So these are all great sources of protein.
Wow, this goes.
It's not a high protein diet. It's like mostly plant rich as opposed to plant based. Now we want starchy veggies and fruit. So you want lots of berries. Berries are good. Blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, pomegranates are great. These are low starchy veggies, and they're really full of antioxidants. Oops. Oh. Now they're all over the floor. So the blueberries are great. All the berries are great. Low fruit.
And starchy veg that you like?
And I like winter squash. I like the sweet potatoes. The honey nut squash is great. It's full
Sweet potatoes are extremely nutrient
dense.
Yeah,
they have carotenoids and antioxidants. So it's all this is medicine. Everything you're eating here is medicine. Helps prevent disease, prevents Alzheimer's, cancer, and so forth. We forgot the quinoa and the wild rice for grains. You can have grains. You can have grains, right? And you're getting grains, and it's good grains that are low starch and low glycemic, and they not a lot of gluten, because gluten can be irritating for people. And then the last thing is treats. You get treats. I call these recreational treats. Everybody loves sugar.
Yeah, no. Again, it's one of those things where it's like you didn't have to package it this way to just push the fact that you need to eat more of the things that he started at the bottom of the pyramid. Then he got to the meat part, got very, very, very weird. And then up the food chain, basically saying not to have a bunch of sweets and super saturated fatty food. So yeah. But I wanted to look into that we're gonna look into the beef fed versus the grass-fed beef versus grain-fed beef, and that whole thing as far as sustainability, because there was a claim made in there that it's just as cheap and sustainable, and and it's better for your health. So we're gonna look into that as well. I'm gonna mark that as well. But let's look at some articles that are looking at the Pegan diet. This diet that is made by Dr. Mark Hyman. I wonder. Let's see, Dr. Mark Hyman. Okay. Interesting. Let's see. What is the Pegan diet? Everything you need to know. Healthline diet score 3.5 out of 5. Dang. This is written by a RD, so a registered dietitian, licensed dietitian. The Pegan diet is a style of eating inspired by two of the most popular diet trends, paleo and vegan. According to its creator, Dr. Mike Hyman, the Pegan diet promotes optimal health by reducing inflammation and balancing blood sugar. However, some components of this diet remain controversial. This article reviews everything you need to know about the Pegan diet, including its potential health benefits and drawbacks. The overall score, this is the diet review scorecard. Overall score 3.5, weight loss 4.25, healthy eating 3, sustainability 2.75, whole body health a 3, nutrition quality a 5, evidence-based a 3. And it says, bottom line, the Pegan diet combines paleo and vegan principles but encourages some meat consumption. Though it's rich in many nutrients that can provide optimal health, it may be too restrictive for many people. And there that goes again, where it's like it's too restrictive, and it's like, again, it's rich in many nutrients that can promote optimal health. It's going to be restrictive because being restrictive is how we get out of where we are. Is kind of the bottom line, really. You're gonna have to restrict what people eat because they're eating too much of what they currently are eating. Let's see. The Pegan diet combines key principles that support optimal health. It is your first thought that going paleo and vegan simultaneously sounds nearly impossible. You're not alone. Yeah, because, they're kind of mutually exclusive from one another in the only distinctive part between the two. Anyway, despite its name, the Pegan diet is unique and has its own set of guidelines. In fact, it's less restrictive than either a paleo or vegan diet by itself. Major emphasis is placed on vegetables and fruit, but intake of small to moderate amounts of meat, certain fish, nuts, seeds, and some legumes is also allowed. Heavily processed sugars, oils, and grains are discouraged, but still acceptable in very small amounts. The Pegan diet is not designed as a typical short-term diet. Instead, it aims to be more sustainable so that you follow it indefinitely. I just don't like the branding in the name, which, I get, because it's like you want to, you're trying to butt in where it doesn't fit in with the name and the crossover by trying to create this third thing, but it's like, why? Foods to eat. The Pegan diet focuses strongly on whole foods or foods that have undergone little to no processing before they make it to your plate. Eat lots of plants. The primary food group for the Pegan diet is vegetables and fruit. These should comprise 75% of your total intake. Low glycemic fruits. Let me zoom in. Sorry. Low glycemic fruits and vegetables such as berries and non-starchy vegetables should be emphasized in order to optimize your blood sugar response. Small amounts of starchy vehicles and sugary fruits may be allowed for those who have already achieved healthy blood sugar control prior to starting the diet. Choose responsibly sourced protein. Although the Pegan diet primarily emphasizes plant foods, adequate protein intake from animal sources is still encouraged. Bear in mind that because 75% of the diet is made up of vegetables and fruit, less than 25% remains for animal-based products. As such, you'll have a much lower meat intake than you would on a typical paleo diet, but still more than on any vegan diet. Yeah. Yeah. This just sounds like being a flexitarian with extra steps. The Pegan diet discourages eating conventionally farmed meats or eggs. Instead, it places emphasis on grass-fed, pasteurized raised sources of pork, beef, poultry, and whole eggs. It also encourages intake of fish, specifically those that tend to have low mercury content like sardines and wild salmon. Stick to minimally processed fats. Yep, except peanuts. Crazy. On this diet, you should eat healthy fats from specific sources such as nuts, except peanuts, seeds, except processed seed oils. Wait, you don't eat seed oils, but you'll eat EVOO? Okay. Avocado oil and olives. Cold-pressed olive and avocado oil may also be used. Coconut, unrefined coconut oil. Omega-3s, especially those from low-mercury fish or algae. Grass-fed, pasteurized, raised meats and whole eggs also contribute to the fat content of the Pegan diet. Some whole grains and legumes may be consumed. Although most grains and legumes are discouraged on the Pegan diet due to their potential influence blood sugar, some gluten-free whole grains and legumes are permitted in limited quantities. Grain intake should not exceed more than half a cup, or 125 grams per meal, while legume intake should not exceed 1 cup, 75 grams per day. Here are some grains and legumes that you may eat. Grains: black rice, quinoa, amaranth, millet, teff, oats. Not even brown rice, just black rice. Interesting. Legumes: lentils, chickpeas, black beans, pinto beans. However, you should further restrict these foods if you have diabetes or another condition that contributes to poor blood sugar control. Foods to avoid. The Pegan diet is more flexible than the paleo or vegan diet because it allows occasional intake of almost any food. That said, several foods and food groups are strongly discouraged. Some of these foods are known to be unhealthy, while others may be considered very healthy, depending on whom you ask. These foods are typically avoided on the Pegan diet. Dairy, cow's milk, yogurt, and cheese are strongly discouraged. However, foods made from sheep or goat milk are permitted in limited quantities. Sometimes grass-fed butter is allowed too. Oh, yeah, it's already finicky. All gluten-containing grains are strongly discouraged. Okay, gluten-free grains, even grains that don't contain gluten, are discouraged. Small amounts of gluten-free whole grains may be permitted occasionally. So this is where it seems like they're trying to make like their differential is you cut out, you don't cut out any form of meat. You just refine it down to grass-fed beef, lean meats, and fish. So I guess by way of that, you automatically take out pork. But then it's like, oh, well, we're going to give you certain processed fats in the way of oils, but we're not going to give you processed carbohydrates. So we're going to restrict your carbohydrate by way of not letting you have as many grains. So it seems like that. And grains and refined sugar, which again, it's like the refined sugar part I get. The grain part, again, not so much, especially when you're talking about like if it's whole grains. But legumes. Most legumes are discouraged due to the potential to increase blood sugar. Low starch legumes such as lentils may be permitted. Any form of added sugar, refined or not, is usually avoided. It may be used occasionally, but very sparingly. Refined oils. Refined or highly processed oils such as canola, soybean, sunflower, and corn oil are almost always avoided. Food additives. Artificial colorings, flavorings, preservatives, and other additives are avoided. The Pegan diet discourages several foods and food groups. However, it is somewhat flexible. Limited amounts of banned foods may be allowed occasionally. Potential benefits. Pegan diet may contribute to your health in a number of ways. The strong emphasis on fruit and vegetable intake is perhaps its best trait. Fruits and vegetables are some of the most nutritionally diverse foods. They're full of fiber, vitamins, minerals, and plant compounds known to prevent diseases and reduce both oxidative stress and inflammation. The Pegan diet also emphasizes healthy unsaturated fats from fish, nuts, seeds, and other plants that may have a positive impact on heart health. Furthermore, diets that rely on whole foods and contain few ultra-processed foods are associated with an improvement in overall diet quality. Potential downsides. Despite its positive attributes, the Pegan diet also has some downsides that are worth considering. Let's take a look. Unnecessary restrictions. Although the Pegan diet allows for more flexibility than a vegan or paleo diet alone, many of the proposed restrictions unnecessarily limit very healthy foods such as legumes, whole grains, and dairy. I disagree with that part. Legumes, whole grains, and I feel like we can all do without. Opponents of the Pegan diet often cite increased inflammation and elevated blood sugars as the primary reasons for the removal of these foods. Of course, some people have allergens to gluten and dairy that can promote inflammation. Yeah, a lot of people have this part, the whole dairy part. Similarly, certain people struggle to control blood sugar when consuming high starch foods like grains or legumes. In these cases, reducing or eliminating these foods may be appropriate. However, unless you have specific allergies or intolerances, it's unnecessary to avoid them. I also don't think that that's true. What are these sources that I have access to? Not to be that guy. I'm going to be that guy, though. I'm going to look at these sources. What are the sources? They're saying it's unnecessary to avoid dairy. So I'm looking at the studies that they're seemingly quoting as the evidence to back that claim. And can I view the full text? I can. Let's see. Dairy products and inflammation, a review of the clinical evidence. Inflammation is a major biological process regulating the interaction between organisms and the environment, including the diet. Because of the increase in chronic inflammatory diseases and in light of the immune regulatory properties of breastfeeding, the ability of dairy products to modulate inflammatory processes in humans is an important but unresolved issue. Here we report a systematic review of 52 clinical trials investigating inflammatory markers in relation to the consumption of dairy products. Oh no. An inflammatory score, IS, was defined to quantitatively evaluate this interaction. The IS was significantly positive for the entire data set, indicating anti-inflammatory activity in humans. When the subjects were stratified according to their health status, the IS was strongly indicative of an anti-inflammatory activity in subjects with metabolic disorders and of a pro-inflammatory activity in subjects allergic to bovine milk. Stratifying the data by product categories associated both low-fat and high-fat products as well as fermented products with an anti-inflammatory activity. Remarkably, the literature is categorized by a large gap in knowledge on bioavailability of bioactive nutrients. Further research should thus better combine food and nutritional sciences to adequately follow the fate of these nutrients along the gastrointestinal, and metabolic axis. So where is their discussion? Pro and anti-inflammatory properties of dairy products. Okay. Overall, the IS of the entire data set comprised of 78 studies results extracted from the 52 human studies indicated that the consumption of dairy products is associated with anti-inflammatory properties in humans. We qualify this association as weak, although significant, because the IS has a low magnitude that is indicative of a low level of confidence in the effect estimate. So, I want to read this again. The entire data set composed of 78 study results extracted from 52 human studies indicated the consumption of dairy products is associated with the anti-inflammatory properties in humans. We qualify this association as weak, although significant, because the IS has a low magnitude that is indicative of a low level of confidence in the effect estimate. By stratifying the study results according to the health status of the enrolled subjects, we identified a pro-inflammatory activity of dairy products in subjects with milk allergy. Okay. This result is mechanistically accepted as hypersensitive reactions can obviously be linked to the pro-inflammatory state. We therefore conclude that the IS is an adequate tool to evaluate the impact of food and dietary patterns on inflammation. Oh. Okay, so these studies are showing that unless you have like allergy, there's not any increase in inflammation, but that's all it's looking at. And when you have such a large percentage of the population that actually is intolerant to dairy, what do you do with that information? So there's no direct link or link with weak to little confidence of the association of dairy products and having an anti-inflammatory effect, but or a it can't be exactly linked to a pro-inflammatory, but it also is not strong evidence for it being a anti-inflammatory. But anywho, furthermore, arbitrary elimination of large groups of foods can lead to nutrient deficiencies if those nutrients aren't carefully replaced. Thus, you may need a basic understanding of nutrition to implement the Pegan diet safely. Lack of accessibility. Although a diet full of organic fruits, vegetables, and grass-fed, pasteurized raised meats may seem great in theory, it may be inaccessible for many people. Yep. For the diet to be successful, you need significant time to develop the meal prep, some experience with cooking and meal planning, and access to a variety of foods that may be quite expensive. Additionally, due to the restrictions on common processed foods, such as cooking oils, dining out may be difficult. This could potentially lead to increased social isolation or stress. Okay, then it gives a sample menu. So just running through, I'm going to run through one day. Let's say Friday. Breakfast: fried eggs, kimchi, braised greens. For lunch: lentil and vegetable stew with a side of sliced cantaloupe. For dinner: salad with radishes, jicama, guacamole, and grass-fed beef strips. Yummy. Bottom line, vegan diet is based on the paleo and vegan principles, though it encourages some meat consumption, emphasizes whole foods. It's rich in many nutrients. Give this diet a try to see how your body responds, rather not. And this is just another article. Well, that's the Pegan diet. Again, new diet just dropped. We out here. So yeah. So I wanted to, at the tail end of this, thought it'd be kind of cute to look at this video. I don't.
This is
I don't know how it's gonna go. It may go good. It may go great. But we're gonna look at most popular meats ranked. The nutrition tier list. The nutrition tier list of meats. That's just 37 minutes long, so we're probably not gonna we're not going over all of this because holy. But let's I want to see some of the best ones, some of the worst ones, and then go from there. Because some of the ones in the middle is probably gonna be very tough to try to go through the minutia.
Talon, and this is the first in my new series, Nutritional Tier Lists, where I'm going to be breaking down all the most commonly eaten options in a specific food group and ranking them based on how nutritious they are and how good they are for your health. Today we're going over meats. Meats are the crux of many people's diets and are often the centerpiece in any given meal. They're also the primary source of protein for much of the population. Meats are unique in the fact that they always contain what is known as a complete protein, meaning they contain all 9 essential amino acids. With all this taken into consideration, meat seemed like a pretty good place to start. Taking a look at the tiers for this video, we're going to be comparing the nutritional benefits of each meat per 100 grams. We have bacon. Pan-cooked pork bacon is a high-calorie, high-protein, and high-fat meat, and is a solid source of certain vitamins and minerals. The reason bacon is so high in protein is because it's dehydrated and is therefore more nutritionally dense per gram. As I said, it's very high in fat, mainly monounsaturated fat like oleic acid, which has been shown to lower LDL levels, improve insulin sensitivity, reduce inflammation, and improve sensory motor function. It's a great source of selenium, which acts like an antioxidant, protecting cells while also playing a key role in DNA formation. And it's the best source of phosphorus on this list, which is needed for growth, cell maintenance, and DNA production. Now, bacon is also very high in saturated fat, which seems to be...
Now, it says at the bottom here, all nutrient quantities based on 100 grams of food. So, 100 grams of bacon is going to give you 38 grams of protein, 40 grams of fat, to which that's being broken down by saturated fat of 13.3. Now, again, I know he's only going over like the goods because he's ranking them or whatever, but it's like, how do you, is he just ranking them based on the nutrition profile of, you know, just on its face? But I guess I'll have to see what number 2 is. But like, you can't. It's 100 gram, whatever.
Be very controversial when it comes to its effects on heart health. In the past, saturated fat has been associated with raising LDL levels and an increased risk of heart disease. However, more recent studies are finding that it might not be that simple, and that it may depend more on the specific type of saturated fatty acid. Different fatty acids are categorized by their carbon chain lengths. I'll make a video going over all of that later, but for the purposes of this video, the length of a specific saturated fatty acid seems to be directly inverted to its effects on LDL cholesterol. For bacon, the most prominent is palmitic acid, which has a carbon length of 16 and seems to raise the concentration of LDL particles, but specifically larger LDL particles, which many researchers have agreed is not as much of a concern. However, in larger quantities, palmitic acid has been shown to adversely affect mood and energy levels. The next most prominent is stearic acid, which has a chain length of 18, and because of that, it seems to mainly have a neutral effect on LDL. The last one worth mentioning is myristic acid, which has a chain length of 14 and is shown to have a stronger effect on LDL levels than even palmitic acid. Overall, bacon seems to promote LDL levels more than HDL levels, but the effects are not as harmful as initially assumed. However, that's not the only potential issue. Bacon is also extremely high in sodium, and too much sodium has been associated with an increased risk of stomach cancer and high blood pressure. High blood pressure has been shown to be harmful in the
because it's dehydrated
long term. However, the link between high salt intake and death from heart disease is not as consistent. Bacon also often contains additives like nitrates and nitrites, which are shown to, under high heat cooking, form compounds called nitrosamines, which are known carcinogens, substances that increase the risk of cancers.
So now I ask him, obviously he thinks that the pros outweigh the cons in this situation because he ranked it number 1, I guess. Or I guess he hasn't ranked it yet. Maybe
However,
maybe this is the first food that came, the first one that he's going with.
In recent times, antioxidants like vitamin C and erythorbic acid are now frequently added during the curing process and are shown to somewhat reduce these effects. The thing is, there are very different types of bacon, and nutrition and healthiness can vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. Bacon has a lot going for it, but it also has a lot that you need to be aware of. And because of that, I'll be placing it in the C tier.
He hasn't placed it yet.
90-10 ground beef is a mid-calorie, high-protein, and decently fatty meat that is a good source of certain micronutrients, specifically zinc and some B vitamins. Zinc is important for new cell development and maintenance of various bodily functions. Beef is also rich in vitamin B12, which is important for maintenance of blood-related functions and the nervous system. It's also a good source of iron in the form of heme iron, which the body absorbs much more efficiently than the iron found in plant sources. Iron is a major component of hemoglobin, which carries oxygen across the body. Beef is high in carnosine, which has been linked with reduced fatigue and improved exercise performance. It's especially high in creatine, which serves as an energy source for muscles. It's also a good source of choline, which is an essential component for cell membranes and plays important roles in brain and memory development. Beef also contains taurine and glutathione, which serve as antioxidants, and contains conjugated linoleic acid, a naturally occurring trans fat that is shown to aid in fat loss. Speaking of fats, the primary fat found in beef is oleic acid, which is shown to lower LDL levels, improve insulin sensitivity, decrease inflammation, and improve sensory motor function. The next most prominent are palmitic acid, shown to raise the concentration of large LDL particles, and stearic acid, which is shown to mainly be neutral in regards to cholesterol. Now, red meat has been long associated with cancer, though the jury does still seem to be out on why. Some believe the heme iron to be the cause. Some believe it's the heterocyclic amines, carcinogenic substances that form during high heat cooking. While the jury is out, I'm going to say that the risk is still potentially there, but be aware of new studies coming out with new information. The last thing I want to mention is the difference between grass-fed and grain-fed beef. Unfortunately, most beef is grain-fed now, but grass-fed beef is shown to have a higher antioxidant content, a healthier fatty acid profile, higher amounts of ruminant trans fats, and higher amounts of omega-3 fatty acids.
Yeah, when you allow an animal to not be just pumped full of grain, which it doesn't want particularly, it wants to be, free grazing on whatever diet that it wants as opposed to the diet that you want to give it. Shocker, shocker, surprise, surprise. It'll turn out an animal that has better nutrition content once you, process it. It's kind of like with a human. You pump a human full of BS. What are you going to get out of that human? BS more often than not. So, yeah.
I'm going to be putting ground beef in the A tier.
The A tier? Okay, I'm already... This list is already... I would have...
But if you're bulking or an athlete, I could totally see why it could be your number one. Bison is a lower-caloried, mid-protein, and mildly fatty meat with a decent concentration of micronutrients similar to other red meats. It's rich in selenium, which protects cells and aids in DNA formation. It's also rich in zinc, which contributes to immune function and new cell development. It contains a variety of B vitamins, mainly providing energy and aiding in red blood cell formation, and is a good source of heme iron, which contributes to the carry of oxygen throughout the body.
Which you're going to see that about a lot of red meat, that it's a good source of heme iron versus non-heme iron, which is plant source versus non-plant source. But at the end of the day, your body is able to, synthesize from both, so it really is a non-factor as far as heme iron versus non-heme iron.
Bison is also a great source of creatine, which serves as an energy source for muscles. It's a good source of choline, which is crucial for the development of cell membranes as well as your brain and memory, and contains conjugated linoleic acid, which is shown to promote fat loss. The main draw of bison compared to something like beef is that it's notably leaner. However, it's also usually grass-fed, making it more nutritious. Its fat concentration is split almost right down the middle between monounsaturated fats, mainly oleic acid, and saturated fats, mainly stearic acid and palmitic acid, with only palmitic acid contributing to an increase in LDL. And of course, there is the link between red meat and cancer that hasn't been completely severed yet and should still be made aware of. Overall, bison is another red meat, contributing more in some senses while falling short in others. Regardless, the unique benefits of this type of meat cannot be denied, and bison will be joining the A tier. Cooked pork bratwurst is a high-calorie, low-protein, and very fatty meat with a lower-than-average micronutrient profile. It is a good source of selenium, which acts as an antioxidant, but the main thing to talk about with bratwurst is the fat. While the primary fatty acid is oleic acid, the monounsaturated fat that is shown to reduce LDL levels among other health benefits, Not too far behind are palmitic acid and stearic acid, again with palmitic acid being the only one among these contributing to an increase in LDL particles, but large ones that are typically not as concerning. Bratwurst also contains a notable amount of linoleic acid, a polyunsaturated fat that is overall shown to reduce LDL levels, with some evidence that it also improves insulin sensitivity and maintains blood pressure, but also seems to promote inflammation. The main takeaway from all this fatty nonsense is that it contributes a lot of calories that aren't really contributing that much compared to its low protein concentration. But on top of that, bratwurst is also higher in sodium, which in excess has been associated with stomach cancer and high blood pressure. They also often contain preservatives, which are obviously not good for the body. Bratwurst is a treat, not what you should be building your diet around, but they're also not the worst. I actually feel they're a D-tier meat. Cooked chicken breast is a low-calorie, high-protein, and low-fat meat with a decent micronutrient profile, highlighting a couple of B vitamins. Chicken breast is among the leanest of meats on this list, making it great for weight loss, but also good for lean muscle growth when complemented properly. It's one of the best sources of vitamin B3 on this list, which is essential for proper metabolism and nervous system function. It's also one of the best sources of vitamin B6, which plays a key role in central nervous system function and metabolism. Chicken breast is high in carnosine, which is linked with reduced fatigue and improved muscle performance, and is supposedly safer for heart health in higher quantities than red meat. Now, not all chicken breast is made equally, or should I say prepared equally. While grilled, baked, and stir-fried chicken are normally as clean as it gets, fried, rotisserie, or lunch meat chicken may contain preservatives, may be cured, may have higher concentrations of sodium, and may potentially be cooked in oils that could have negative effects. This all being said, they probably still retain most of the positives. Simply due to the high protein concentration and the versatility of chicken breast in your meal plan, I'm going to be placing it in the top tier. Cooked chicken thigh is a mid-calorie, mid-protein, and relatively fatty meat with a decent amount of micros. It's much higher in zinc than chicken breast, which zinc is important for new cell development, and it's still a good source of selenium, which acts as an antioxidant, and vitamin 3, which regulates the metabolism and nervous system. The skin.
Now, again, this is also per 100 grams of this food. So you're not just, eating one thing. Like, you got to get 100 grams of it in order for this profile to match.
Which seems to be more commonly eaten with the thigh than the breast, is one of the best sources of glycine, an amino acid that acts as an antioxidant and aids in central nervous system function. However, the real differences between chicken thigh and chicken breast meat is that the thigh trades a bit of protein for a notable amount of fat. Mainly oleic acid, a monounsaturated fat that is shown to reduce LDL and improve insulin sensitivity and sensory motor function, but also palmitic acid, the saturated fat that is shown to increase larger LDL particles, and linoleic acid, the polyunsaturated fat that is shown to lower LDL, but comes with a few problems of its own. Overall, you can't go wrong with including chicken thigh in your diet. The trade from protein to fats comes with its own benefits, but makes it a little less splashable. I'll be placing chicken thigh in the A tier. Atlantic cod is a very low-calorie, mid-protein, and low-fat meat with a mild at best micronutrient profile. The main draw to cod is that it's a very lean protein source. It's a good source of selenium, which is used as an antioxidant and plays a key role in DNA formation. It's high in creatine, which serves as an energy source for muscles, and it's shown to support heart health and control blood pressure. Cod liver oil is very high in vitamin A, vitamin D, and omega-3 fatty acids, and it does have a lower and safer concentration of mercury when compared to other fish, hovering at about 0.11 parts per million. The main problem with cod is that it's just lower in protein and omega-3s than other fish options. But it's also been known to potentially contain some parasites and has been associated with gout problems. Cod is a good meat, fish, whatever, that's only going in the B tier due to its falling short nutritionally compared to other options. Cooked Dungeness crab is a low-calorie, mid-protein, and low-fat meat with a really solid micronutrient profile owing mainly to its high concentration of vitamin B12. That vitamin B12 is important for blood and nervous system maintenance, but it's also a good source of selenium, which functions as an antioxidant and aids in DNA production. It also contains a good amount of zinc, which is vital for new cell development, and crab is one of the best sources of copper, which maintains the immune system, aids in the making of red blood cells, and is essential in metabolizing iron, so it helps prevent anemia. Crab is a good source of omega-3 fatty acids, which is shown to raise HDL levels, decrease inflammation, maintain blood pressure, and aid in hormone creation. Crab is also a good source of astaxanthin, a carotenoid shown to increase HDL levels and protect brain health. Now, crab is higher in sodium than most meats, so you're going to want to keep an eye out not to eat too much, and it has been associated with gout problems. However, crab's unique benefits can't be overlooked, and I believe it deserves a spot in the top tier.
I want to know, and I'll do some research to see if there's other, because this producer said that they were going to have other videos of tier lists. So I wonder if there's like I would imagine he's going to do a plant protein tier list. But I wonder when we look at that, how many times he's going to have the opportunity to be like, oh, this has been associated with these like soy. Like, I can just imagine now, like, they're like, tofu comes with the heart risks of and causes cancer can contain levels of mercury that can be it's like, will they all just have benefits and then they're just strictly looking at the nutritional profile? I wonder. But so far, I would put all these meats in the F tier, or, but that's just me. But if I had to parse through and, looking at it from a dietitian standpoint with a client that, is going to keep these foods in their diet, yeah, like so far, I think, again, I feel like I would put bacon a lot lower just because, again, of the negatives associated with it. I feel like in this video, there's a high, again, it's like protein is the whole thing, but it's like, yeah, this whole category is going to be talking about protein over fat. So it's like, if you're ranking their nutrition list, but you're heavily putting a lot of stock into just protein and protein alone, then of course, like, this list is going to change depending on your value of protein over everything else. So with me looking at it, it's like, well, no, I'm going to go ahead and slide bacon to F. I'm going to go ahead and slide bratwurst to F. Going ahead and going to slide chicken breast to A. Chicken thigh, I'm going to slide down into B. Bison, I'm going to slide that one to B. Ground beef to B as well. Chicken breast to A. Crab, B. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. And it looks like he's about to start with duck.
Cooked domestic duck is a mid-calorie, mid-protein, and pretty fatty meat with a decent micronutrient profile. It's a good source of selenium, which acts as an antioxidant, and certain B vitamins. Duck is also shown to promote heart health and improve bone strength. And it's definitely a fattier meat, with the highest concentration being oleic acid, a monounsaturated fat shown to lower LDL, among other health benefits. Next is palmitic acid, a saturated fat shown to raise the concentration of large LDL particles and adversely affect mood and energy levels in excess. And duck's fat is rounded out with linoleic acid, stearic acid, and palmitoleic acid, all of which hold a more neutral stance than the other two. Duck is not a bad meat, but the way I see it, there's nothing that duck provides that some other meat can't do better. To me, it makes the most sense for it to be in the B tier. Whole chicken eggs, which I know are not a meat, but like, where else did you want me to put them? Anyways, eggs are a mid-calorie, lower protein, and higher fat proto-meat with a wide list of micronutrients. Eggs actually contain almost every nutrient with the exception of vitamin C. They're a great source of selenium, which acts as an antioxidant and plays a key role in DNA formation. It's among the best sources of vitamin A on this list, which mainly aids in eye health and preservation. And it's also among the best sources of folate, vitamin B2, vitamin B5, and vitamin E. Eggs are very high in choline, which is an essential component for cell membranes and plays important roles in brain and memory development.
Yeah, basically they're just saying, like, if this egg, and I'm assuming it's a chicken egg, it's like, yeah, This contains all the food and nutrients necessary to create a life. Minus, obviously, what they were saying with the contains almost every single one except for vitamin C. I think it was that it said. But yeah, just much like the reason why cow's milk is so calorically dense is because it's meant for a cow. Like it would take way more human milk to feed a cow than it takes cow milk to feed a human, because obviously like they're two different sized animals, mammals. So yeah, like an egg is going to contain everything that is going to be needed in life, from being a great source of protein to being having fats there as well, to having all the vitamins and nutrients, as most of them, 99.9% of them. So it makes sense that to bring a life into the world, there's a lot of things have to be present in its environment in order for that to happen.
They're also a good source of creatine, which acts as an energy source for muscles. Despite being high in cholesterol, they're actually shown to raise HDL levels, and despite having a lower raw protein concentration, they contain amino acids in all the right ratios for the body's absorption and use. Lastly, eggs are very filling, making them great for weight loss and breakfast. They are pretty high in fat, with the main contributors being oleic acid, palmitic acid, linoleic acid, and stearic acid, with the quantities and primary functions on screen. In a lot of ways, eggs are the best at what they do, and almost everyone could do for a couple more a week in their diet.
Nope.
I'll be placing them in the top tier. Cooked.
I'd put them in A. And I wouldn't even put them in here because they're not a meat. So, it's definitely an animal product. Like, I didn't think that this was an animal product tier list, but
Goat is a low-calorie, mid to high protein, and low-fat meat with a decent micronutrient profile. In fact, goat is among the leanest of red meats. It's high in zinc, which is necessary for new cell development, and it's also high in a few B vitamins, namely B2, B3, and B12. But arguably the most important one is B12, which is responsible for DNA synthesis and cell energy production. Goat is also a good source of heme iron, which makes hemoglobin, which moves oxygen throughout the body. Goat is high in choline, which is used for cell membranes and brain and memory development. Now, goat is shown to release cancer-inducing chemicals when cooked on high heat, though goat is not nearly as thoroughly researched in regards to cancer as other meat options. Overall, goat takes the place filling in the role of the leaner red meat, giving you a unique blend of benefits. I'm going to be placing it in the A tier. Lunch meat ham is a lower calorie, low protein, and somewhat fatty meat, and is a mild source of micronutrients. Ham is high in selenium, which the body uses as an antioxidant, and is also a good source of vitamin B1, which is needed for healthy skin and nervous system function. Ham is also higher in manganese than most meats. Manganese helps the formation of bones, connective tissue, and certain hormones. It's also a good source of carnosine, which has been linked with reduced fatigue and improved muscle performance. Now, ham is a fattier meat, with its main fatty acid being oleic acid, a monounsaturated fat shown to lower LDL among other health benefits. Next is palmitic acid, a saturated fat that is shown to raise the concentration of large LDL particles. And the leftovers primarily consist of stearic acid and linoleic acid. Ham is also higher in sodium than most meats, which too much sodium has been associated with higher blood pressure and an increased risk of stomach cancer. Also, the curing and smoking processes may increase the risk of certain cancers. They also typically contain nitrate and nitrite-based preservatives. All in all, it seems like a lot of the problems are not so much with the meat itself, but how it's prepared. Ham comes with some unique benefits as well as its fair share of issues. I'll be placing it in the C tier. Beef and pork hot dogs are a high-calorie, low-protein, and very fatty meat with a practically negligible micronutrient profile. They go straight to the F tier. Cooked lamb is a high-calorie, mid-protein, and high-fat meat, and is a decent placing it in the B tier. Cooked beef liver is a low-calorie, if you can stomach it, that is. Cooked mutton is a relatively high-calorie, earned a spot in the top tier. Pepperoni is a manganese, which helps the formation of bone
meats in the
fat
top
meat
tier.
with a good micronutrient.
Okay, we're gonna. There's only a few more I want to look. Okay, let's I want to look at ground pork.
Put it in the D tier.
I don't care
Cooked
about
ground
salami as
pork is
much.
a high calorie, mid to high protein, and high
Very
fat
fat.
meat with a good micronutrient profile. It's one of the best sources of vitamin B1, which is needed for healthy skin and nervous system function. It's also high in selenium, which the body uses as an antioxidant. Pork is a good source of creatine, which serves as an energy source for muscles. It's also a good source of carnosine, which has been linked with reduced fatigue and improved muscle performance. And it's also got a good amount of choline, which is used in cell membranes and brain and memory development. Now, pork is much fattier than most red meats, with the main fatty acids being oleic acid, palmitic acid, stearic acid, and linoleic acid. Be careful with how you cook your pork as well. Pork, when cooked at high heats, is shown to raise heterocyclic amines, which raise the risk of several types of cancer. But when it's undercooked, it could leave you vulnerable to parasites like toxoplasma and tapeworms, though this is not nearly as common as it once was. All my life, I've always thought of pork as beef's fat little brother, and, well, it kinda is. But it's overall a net positive meat, and I think it edges out in the B tier. Pan-fried pork chops are a high-calorie, mid-protein, and high-fat meat with a solid micronutrient profile. It's a good source of selenium, which the body uses as an antioxidant, and vitamin B1, which is needed for healthy skin and nervous system function. Pork is a good source of creatine, which serves as an energy source for muscle. It's a good source of carnosine, which has been linked with reduced fatigue and improved exercise performance. And it's also a good source of choline, which the body uses in cell membranes and brain and memory development. Once again, pork is pretty fatty for red meat, still containing mainly oleic acid, palmitic acid, stearic pork chops in the B tier as well. Cooked wild rabbit is a lower calorie, very high protein, and very lean meat with a very solid micronutrient profile. Rabbit is interestingly one of the few mammals categorized as white meat. It's an amazing source of vitamin B12, which is important for blood and nervous system maintenance, landing at a safe spot in the top tier. Salami is a high calorie, lower protein, and higher fat meat with a surprisingly high micronutrient profile. It's a good source of B vitamins. It belongs in the D tier. Raw sockeye salmon is a mid-calorie, mid-protein, and mildly fatty meat with an impressive micro profile. It is, but I don't think anyone would do that. Cooked pork Italian sausage is a high-calorie, low-protein, and very fatty meat with a solid micronutrient profile. It's a good moderation and will be joining the D tier. Cooked shrimp is a very low-calorie, mid-protein, and lean meat with a decent micronutrient profile.
B tier.
Earning it a place in the A tier. Beef tenderloin steak is a higher calorie, higher protein, and higher fat meat with an important set of micronutrients.
C tier.
Steak will also be joining the A tier. Canned skipjack tuna is a low calorie, high protein, and very lean meat with an impressive micronutrient profile. It's an amazing source of selenium,
A
which the
tier.
staple of your diet. It's going in the A tier. Fresh yellowfin tuna is also a very low calorie, higher protein, and very lean meat with a micronutrient profile that's better in some ways. Fresh tuna should be in the B tier because of it. Roasted turkey breast is a low-calorie, high-protein, and very lean meat with a solid count of micronutrients. I believe it belongs in the top tier. Cooked ground turkey is a mid-calorie, high-protein, but one befitting of the A tier. Lastly, cooked ground venison is a lower-calorie, higher-protein, and
A tier.
venison is one of the better red meats, and will cap off our list with a final A tier placement. Looking at the list, eating most unprocessed meats will be a net positive for you. As I mentioned before, they're a staple of most people's diets, and the most reliable source of complete protein, the main building block for muscle. But the majority of them also contain several other nutrients essential for optimal body and brain function. Hopefully this video gave you some solid source of micronutrients, but one befitting of the A tier. Lastly, cooked ground venison and B12 being and will cap off our list with a final A tier.
Okay, so his tier list is as follow. You have in the F tier, hot dogs. D tier, bratwurst, salami, pepperoni, and Italian sausage. C tier, bacon and ham. B tier, cod, duck. I think just regular steak, ground pork, pork chops, fresh tuna. A tier, ground beef, bison, chicken thigh, goat, shrimp, steak, canned tuna. I think that's turkey breast and venison. And at the top tier, you have chicken breasts, crab, egg, liver, rabbit. I think that's lamb, I want to say. Salmon and white turkey breast. A lot of these I would knock down a tier, and probably somewhere down the line I'll do my own little tier list. Again, it's like, will I really do a meat tier list? Probably not, because of you putting on meat. But again, depending on how you're looking at it and how you want to look at the tier list, it feels like, again, like they're really looking at the protein and then followed by everything else after that, which when you're looking at animal proteins, that's the first thing that you're going to look at. Kind of like when you're looking at fruit, the first thing you're going to look at is its carbohydrates. Or I actually probably go as far as to say that protein being necessary has been beaten into so many people's minds that you actually look at carrot protein content first before you even look at anything else. But I digress. But that is going to wrap up today as far as this episode. It has been real, but not too real. I'm going to go ahead and transition now. And yeah. Okay, I pull up. But anyways,